Are we ready to start? Great. Let's kick it off. Welcome to everyone. In case you have not already done so, kindly visit the link in order to just download the slides that we're going to be covering tonight. Can you please just make sure that your mic is on mute? Thank you. So yes, as we mentioned last time we met, we said that today the focus will be on just talking about what happens on the day. So the slides essentially covers, first of all, just an overview of what the APC 2019 assessment was all about. And we're going to be using that when we discuss some of the specifics that we've got to share with you tonight. So that would be the main one, just to make sure that we are focused and you can be able to go back to that particular case study and see how the rest of the tasks or the rest of the case study was supposed to be handled, even for the sections that will not have the opportunity to discuss them. So starting off is just to just make sure we all understood and we all are clear in terms of what the 2019 case study was all about. So the first slide essentially, or slide number 3, essentially just captures how the case study looked like. And if you then just have a glimpse of it, you can see that the specific disciplines, being your auditing, your accounting, math, and tax, were strongly covered. And just on a high level, you can clearly see that what we used to call math or strategy, risk, and governance were dominant across the case study. And just that's just by looking at task D, which was a specific math task. Then we look at task F, which was also math. Then G, H, and I, they had a strategy risk management component in them. And this is just in relation to what we discussed the other day, that APC has got a very strong element of what business decision making. And you'll then appreciate that when you talk about management accounting, or as SAICA normally calls, or nowadays calls it, management decision making and control, this has quite a lot of what decision making in the process. So you will be expected to have that kind of a professional judgment, to have those kind of professional skills in order to be able to assess the information put before you and be able to make decisions around them. But then when you also go to the APC regulation, or the setting regulation or policy, they specify that there will never be an APC without accounting tasks. So accounting, it's one of the fundamental, as competency that each and every APC will have accounting as a minimum. But they are saying that the other disciplines, it's possible that you may have them or you may not have them. But I think one could expect that maybe it will be very difficult to have an APC without auditing or without management decision making and control. So those are some of the things that I just want you to keep at the back of your mind, and that you need to be well aware of as you're preparing and dealing with the pre-released information over the coming weekend. Then, if you've gone through the task, you'll see that this is just a summary of what was being covered. So I don't want us to spend too much time on it, but you will then be able to refer back and forth as we go through our discussion today. But what was of interest to me was the examiner's report. Because the examiner's report, I think if you're just trying to get a sense of what went wrong, maybe why some of the candidates that sat for the paper were not successful. It could be that you are a first timer, or you are repeating, or you're going to be repeating the APC. But what the message that's actually in the examiner's report can be very helpful and very powerful in just helping you to prepare, because it helps you to understand how they actually define a competent response for each and every task. And when you go through it, you'll then be able to answer question of, well, was it a coverage that I was required to get right? Well, was it depth that I was required to get right? Was it integration skill, critical thinking, and so on and so on. So if you have not already done so, I'll strongly encourage you to spend time with that examiner's report, understand what were some of the shortfall that the examination team actually saw. And additionally, you'll then be able to do what? You'll then be able to just see well, what are the pitfalls to avoid, or what very good response to the examiner. And when you even go through the detail, it will then help you to prepare some key takeaways. And this is what I was doing when I was looking at that examiner's report. And these were my 8 key takeaways. And key meaning that, yes, there could be some of the things that were mentioned in there. But for me, if I was saying that I'm going to sit for the upcoming APC, and this is what the examination team is saying, what is it that I need to be mindful of? What is it that I need to be aware of? So first of all, if we then look or put our focus on the picture that we've got on our left, which is just a summary of the results. So the first comment coming from the examiner's report was to say that a lot of responses, they were just not there. It's not like candidates are not I just overall missing the point altogether. But the examiner was saying that majority of the candidates had a very good idea of what was required from them. But however, their responses were just not at a level where they will want to say that you are ready to be considered an entry-level CA. So it's not, and that to me is a bit encouraging, because it means that it's those small things that you really need to get right, that you need to spend more of your time as you go through these particular reports to just say, this is what I need to consider, this is how I need to think about things, and so on and so on. So if you look at not sure what happened there, but I believe I'm back now. Can you hear me? All right, thank you. So yes, so yeah, not sure what happened there, but I think I'm back. Thank you for confirming. So as I was saying, that if we start on the picture on the right, so the green refers to the LCs, the light blue refers to the BC, and the dark blue refers to what? Refers to the Cs. So I'm just being very light on the colors. I know some people will be saying it's teal, turquoise, and so on, but I'm just going to keep it simple. So light blue and blue. But then if you look at the light blue, which is the one in the middle, you'll get to see that in majority of the task, it was the dominant one. And this is exactly that examiners are saying that, yes, you've got a good idea of what we want from you, but there are a couple of things that you are not doing right that we want you to be able to get right for us to consider your response to be a competent response. So when we look at task A, which was the auditing task, and task B, it was very concerning what the picture, or what the picture is saying there, because it's saying that, all right, a majority of the task, more than 50% of the candidates, they didn't provide the responses that were considered to be of competent outcome by the examiners. And in task A, it was about 60%, and in task B, about 65%, meaning that there are really gaps in terms of what? In terms of some of the auditing competencies. It could be, or it could be that there were specific things that candidates needed to pick up that they didn't, or were not able to pick up. And that's what this picture is saying. And I think it's always quite surprising or quite unexpected to say that the majority of the candidates sitting for APC are probably having an auditing background, but the picture that we have here is saying that the auditing task were the ones where candidates didn't do very well at all. And I think then from a message perspective, it means that either you need to probably put more time on the technical task, and maybe be able to link them more to the scenario and so on. But as we go through the case, the material today, I want you to be able to find yourself, to say, maybe this is where I am. Maybe I didn't do so well, or maybe when I was going through the paper, I didn't do so well because it incorporated auditing and accounting, and maybe my accounting is not so strong, or maybe they wanted me to take this particular went through the entire examiner's report. As I was saying, I then summarized these 8 insight points that were coming from there. So the first one is that they're saying that tasks that tested pervasive skills, such as critical thinking, problem solving, and effective communication, proved to be more challenging to the candidates. And this was quite interesting, that the examiner is saying that probably the technical issues, yes, the task with this kind of strong technical competence are not well handled. But it seems what the examiners are saying is that the primary issue, though, was the issue around critical thinking that was incorporated into the task. Issues of problem solving, and effective communication. And those are some of the professional skills that we highlighted at the last time that we were here. And what we want to also just flag out in terms of how do you demonstrate that? How do they pick up, or how do you pick up that this is what is expected of you? Because sometimes you go in and like, no, this was clearly an auditing part. But now, how do I now incorporate or bring these professional skills or pervasive skills that they require from me? And how am I assessed? What if my response is outstanding or is missing those elements? Will I then be fine? And so on. So that was key takeaway number 1, that pervasive skills are a bit lacking, and that's something that one needs to just be mindful of as they respond or tackle the various tasks. Number 2, this is a very interesting one. So they are saying that candidates are writing far too much in response to the task. And this, I think it should challenge quite a lot of you, or if you're one of those, you should find this point a challenge that is coming from the examiner, that writing too much does not necessarily mean you're on the right track. So this is something that they flagged out, that in the APC 2019, I think they said that the longest response was about 60 pages. And 60 pages probably was not even at the end of the day, a competent outcome for that particular response or the entire response. So they're saying that you really need to have a strategy before you respond. You need to be clear what the task is looking for from you. You need to then have a clear structure of, this is what I'm going to say, this is where I'm going to start, this will be my supporting points, and this will be my conclusion kind of setup. So you really need to take the time to plan how your response is going to look like. And related to that, they are saying that additionally, there's been evidence of a decline in communication skills relative to what? Relative to prior years. So communication skill is something that we also highlighted as one of what? As one of the challenging aspects of the APC. And even when you go through the examiner's report or specimen responses, for the for the responses that actually qualify or secure an HC outcome, you'll see that one of the comments that will be coming from the examiners is that they liked the technical, the strong technical understanding, tick. They like the critical thinking, the link between the scenario and the response. And additionally, they liked the communication skills. So it's something that one needs to understand, that it will be very important in terms of just having that response that is what? That is one, to the point, and that is effective. And here, as we'll get to see later on, when we talk about communication skills, we are not simply just limiting it to what? To sentence construction, spelling errors, but we are talking about that kind of communication that is impactful, that is able to articulate your thinking process. It's got a logical structure in it, and so on and so on. But we'll expand more on that. But examiners were saying that there's been a decline in those effective communication skills, meaning that sometimes the candidates are writing too much, not because they've got too many ideas, but because it's taking them too long to just elaborate a point, because they are not structured. Maybe some of the points are being repeated because they've not been planned properly, and so on and so on. So it's something that you need to really be clear about, to say that, all right, if I've got a problem with time management, if I find myself that I don't finish or I end up rushing some of the later tasks, then you need to ask yourself, am I falling in category number 2, problems, where now they're saying that I'm writing far too much in relation to what is required. Then number 3, they're saying that although technical tasks were well handled, so they were quite happy with the technical competence, that they felt that the candidates demonstrated an understanding of the technical elements that were being tested, that if it was a deferred text, candidates knew what deferred text was all about. But it could be that they just didn't write enough, or they just wrote too much, or they did not pick up the issue, which now talks to the pervasive skills. So examiners are saying that they believe technical skills are there, but there was evidence of dumping theory and providing too much technical detail. So technical competence is important for APC, but the technical detail is not. So just then going through that kind of ITC style, where now you say, sorry, I'm back again. So I'll just change the device in a few minutes time. Yeah, I don't know what's happening to my phone today, but it's acting up. But anyway, so as I was saying, that technical competence, yes, it's important. Your ability to demonstrate a strong standing, it has to be there. But you need to be mindful of how you present it. And in some cases, it could be around communication again. How do you demonstrate to someone that you know your work and you know how it relates to the facts of the case, without necessarily saying that a PPE asset is an asset that you use for more than 12 months, that is 1, 2, 3, and so on and so on. And in this case, blah, blah, blah. How do you now summarize it in a way that it could just be 2 lines, rather than half a page where you are giving a definition and another quarter of a page where now you are really applying? So it's some of those things that when we talk about too much technical detail, what are we talking about? What is it when they're saying you are dumping theory, and how do you go about avoiding those? So those are some of the things that we'll want to touch on tonight. Because as I'm saying, these are just what is coming from the examiner's report for APC 2019. Then number 4, one of the things that came out also from that report is that the tasks that had a core issue in them, they were also not well handled. So when we say a core issue, is that when you review tasks, there will be a lot of things happening, as we'll see when we analyze different documents. But in some cases, there will be that one thing that is so critical that if you ignore it or if you miss it, then it becomes so difficult for me to even consider a C outcome. And if now you then are not going to have a strong response on the other elements, your response automatically moves down to LC. And this sometimes it requires, again, an intimate understanding of the case study, which talks to critical reading and reading of what careful reading or critical reading of the document, where now you are seeing the conversation develop and you are now picking up that, hold on, it appears that management are concerned by this one issue. But this one issue also is coupled with 1, 2, 3, 4. And what the examiners are saying is that candidates are then able to identify 2, 3, 4, but they are not then dwelling on this core issue, such that even if those other issues are well handled, because you did not focus strongly on the issue that is at hand, it becomes very difficult for you to do what? For you to achieve a positive outcome on that particular tasks. And I'll just show you some of those specific things that were mentioned in relation to this case study. And as you go through the rest of the case study, you'll then be able to see that, oh, wait, the documents that are provided, they really have so much value in them because they direct my thinking. So whether my file is very robust, whether it's got so much detail, if I don't use my knowledge and the content that I've compiled to really let me just quickly move from this because I think it's just not working tonight. So let me see. Give me a sec, please. Hello? Are you able to hear me now? Let's see. All right. Thank you. Let me try to speak. All right. Yes, sorry about that. So hopefully this will be what? This will be all sorted. Okay. So we're talking about what? We were talking about the fourth insight coming from that report, just to say it's very important that you're able to identify the core issue and be able to develop it with enough what? With enough coverage or breadth in order to be able to secure a successful outcome. Then the next thing, it's just about what? Ethical leadership. So again, the comment from examiners were saying that in most instances, there were evidence that candidates were not able to identify the ethical dilemmas or the professional ethics issue or ethical issues that were in the specific tasks. That sometimes it's easy to deal with a task like task I, which was specifically an ethics issue. But in other cases, there were ethical concerns that you could have identified and be able to raise. And they were concerned that once candidates are there, once they see evaluation, they forget that there could be underlying elements that require them to really apply their judgment or moral judgment to say that maybe this could be a concern, maybe this could raise this could raise conflict of interest, this could be just intimidation threat, this could be familiarity issues, and so on and so on. So those are some of the things that you just need to be aware of, especially when you are reading and you are not getting that fuzzy warm feeling about what is happening. So maybe you are reading and they're saying that, okay, in order to just then conclude this contract, the CFO spoke to maybe someone from the department, regardless of the conversation. Those are the things that should make you concerned that why is this thing happening in this particular form? And this is what they want you to just be aware of, that you need to always demonstrate ethical leadership and be able to have that, what do you call it, maybe a strong moral compass in order to be able to just see what could be concerning in relation to business transactions. Then the other insight that came out from that particular report is the fact that integrated thinking is still a challenge. Integrated thinking, just the fact that in most of this in the APC itself, remember what we said about it, that it's a multidisciplinary assessment and it requires integrated thinking in order to solve problems. And in some cases, especially what was evident in task B, where you really needed to understand the accounting implication or accounting implication of impairment of goodwill before you start talking about the audit procedures. So in that particular instance, if your accounting was not so strong, or if you miss some of the accounting implication, it was going to be very difficult to then talk about whether the audit procedures were sufficient or what additional audit procedures you needed to deal with. So that is what task B is all about, or it was a testing to say, when you talk about integrated think, are you able to realize that there is a link with between an accounting component and a tax component, between an accounting component and a math component, and so on and so on. And they are saying what? They are saying that you really need to be able to see that link, but additionally, you need to be able to identify and isolate issues so that you can deal with them before you move on to the next subtask. Then number 7 is just the point about tasks that required application of business acumen. They also fared unfavorably. So this is where now we are saying that during your or your research period, did you really understand how the business operates, how it generates value, how it actually generates revenues, use that revenue in order to grow or to deal with its growth demands and so on. What are the risks that it faces? What are the strengths that are related to the business? So it's like that strategic overview, where you're now saying that I understand how or what are the issues surrounding, say, retail property groups. These are the issues that came out when I was looking at this particular company and so on. And beyond that, it's now a matter of how do I use that insight in order to respond to those management decision and making control decision tasks, strategy and risk management tasks. And as I said, there were quite a lot of them here. And therefore, business acumen was required to really demonstrate your understanding. And this is where a number of candidates always ask, then how do I bring my research that I've done in terms of just understanding the issues or understanding the company into my responses? Is it a matter of name drop, or do I really need to bring the facts of the case? Or do I really need to take the facts of the case or any practical business situation that I've seen and link it back to what to the task that I'm dealing with. And a lot of candidates, in most cases, they are unable to bring the two together. And it's very important at this point to highlight that this is not about name dropping. This is not about simply highlighting what you've read or what you've researched, but it's saying that now that I know or that I've researched and I've taken what I've read as my knowledge, how do I now link it to to this particular situation? Because you have to imagine that you are in a boardroom or you are in a management meeting, and they're saying that we've got a problem. We've got a client that is asking us for rent reduction. What should we do? Then you're like, oh, by the way, Edcon asked for rent reduction as well. How would that add value in that meeting? You therefore need to say, all right, so from what you have read or what you've understood about the Edcon case, how do we now bring it to make a decision about the kind of situation that we are dealing with? And it's something that is very important because it's still a concern for examiners how candidates are doing the research, and even more so how they are bringing it back to their responses or to the responses of the tasks. So that talks to point number 7. Then number 8 is just generally about that point that we're talking about, to say that if you find yourself copying and pasting stuff from your file, it means that it might be, or there's a great risk that you are not applying the content that's in there. That you are simply doing what? You are simply dumping the content without necessarily linking it to the problem under consideration. So this is something that examiners are consistently worried about. Like, for instance, when you look at some of the responses that were considered to be LC, you could then say that, hold on, I've seen this somewhere. And when I go to the Vukile annual report, I was like, no, but it seemed that this candidate had simply taken a page from the Vukile report, and they came in when they were asked about risk, they just copied that as it is. And I mean, it cannot be that that's how research works. It cannot be that that's how we are doing our work on a daily basis, where information from another company is just applied without what due consideration of what our company does differently and so on. So that is something that you need to just be aware of, because such undermines what? Such undermines your response. And even more so, they do indicate that it's not a matter of what? Negative credit, where now you do it and it reduces some of the credit that you've already accumulated in the other aspects of your response. But it's just that issue of impression, that when I am assessing your professional competence, it's very difficult for me to ignore that you don't have, or you have not demonstrated effective research skills. You have not demonstrated what? A critical thinking, effective communication by simply taking information and just pasting it as it is. I cannot assess and give you credit for those professional skills. So that is something that one just needs to be what? To be mindful of. And as I'm saying, this is based on what the unsuccessful candidates in the APC demonstrated to the marking team. And then the examiners then summarize those insights just to make sure that you preparing for APC 2020, you can understand why, what really undermines or impairs your response, so that you can avoid them and make sure that what? You're able to secure a positive outcome come the assessment. So that is just what? That is just the insights coming from that examiner's report. So before we move on, let me just see, are there any comments? I see. So let me just check the chat. For some reason, auditing is the challenging task for me when writing APC, but I never had issues for APC. And doing it makes sense than giving what? APC answers. So are you saying that APC responses, is it something that you find that it's not part of your day-to-day? The link, let me just see if I can quickly copy it. When doing accounting tasks, are we meant to write down the IFRS reference numbers? Then that's actually a very good question, Sipho. And I think, again, it's all about what is the task? So as we talk about communication, then I could say that if you are writing a note to if you are writing a note to the board, do you want the board to really be engaging with IFRS, or for them to just engage with the issues that is coming out? And that is something that one needs to ask themselves. Maybe it could be that when you're responding to a junior person, like Leonard in this case, you might give him references to the standard so that he can go back and be able to study those things for himself so that he can do better going forward. So it's always a matter of just considering what is the purpose of the response and what do you want someone to do with it. And I'll say that if it's senior executive level like the board, I will not necessarily do so. But if it's a junior person or colleague, then it might be necessary, especially if you're giving them review notes, at least to fall back on something so that they can understand and not make similar mistakes going forward. Then how exactly do we mean by too much technical detail? So sometimes too much technical detail talks to it just talks to that aspect of giving just theory every time before you get to the point. And now I'm saying that, yes, you do know the technical element, but you don't need to just get straight to the point, apply, and then move on. So the issue about identifying ethical issues, so ethics, you'll see that we're going to discuss later on. So we're going to park it for that later on. How do we identify the core issue later? We're going to touch on that. Writing is very subjective. It's tricky to determine when to stop. What elements can one consider? For me, it's all about planning. If you're able to plan and say, so it's like if now I ask you a question, you can give me a very long-winded answer, but even if I'm to demonstrate my effective communication, I need to be able to sift out what is the point of a 5-minute response. Like, what were you telling me in your 5-minute response? Also, you are just telling me that, yes, we've got a problem of 1, 2, 3. So that is how I am able to improve what my communication, because it's all about getting to the point. It's all about getting to the point. And that's how you need to think about it. If you are to cut through your own explanation and say, did I need to go here to get there? That's how you need to think about it. But again, it's going to be what? It's going to be a matter of us engaging more on those communication skills later on. I came to the conclusion that every time I write as if you're addressing board member. Remember, the board member may be made up of Caspar, Julius, and Jay-Z. Do they even know IFRS? It'll be a very interesting board. But yeah, so yeah, so with financial accounting, do I always have to code the standards? Not necessarily. I think the point that I was talking to, CPO, is something that you can consider. It's tricky to balance depth and long response. How do we solve that issue? We'll discuss that when we specifically get to that. So you'll see that's also addressed on the slides. But I think some of the points that are coming out, remember that this is what that was evident. And we're going to talk about a lot of this just to make sure that you are able to think about it in a way that might be considered to be appropriate, especially as a response from an entry-level chartered accountant in an assessment format like the APC. Okay, so now let's look at how are your responses assessed? Because I think this, or the understanding of this, will then help you to what, to really see the issues around depth, communication, and so on and so on. So Fedi will take us through this one.
Thank you, Rendani. Am I audible, Rendani?
Yes, you are. Thank you, Fedi.
Good, thank you. Thanks, and hello, everyone. Yeah, so I guess at this moment, maybe, did I say hello? Yes, I did say hello. We're going to then now talk about how you are being assessed. So what are they actually looking for? And what are the markers considering to conclude that someone is competent or not competent? Okay. I think there should be a link to the slides, Grace. I think Rendani was addressing that earlier. If you push to the next slide, Rendani. Good. So you guys are being assessed on a holistic level, which is what I call the overall level. And that's where probably I'm going to start at an overall level. Actually, I should be starting at an indicator level, but actually I'm going to demonstrate exactly how the assessing team or the marking team is looking at your script and saying, is it a competent response or not? So basically, because the markers would have read the case study, both the pre-release information, the information on the day, and also made sure that they've read the specimen solution and the task list, and they know what the marking grid looks like. Think about it as a rubric as to what the expectation level is. So they can actually simply read, I had Rendani talking about a 60-page document. They can read your document, your full response, and as they are reading your full response, they are making an impression. They are making an impression of you. So some things are actually impressing them. Some of the things are letting you down in their impression, but they actually building an impression of you over the entire script. 60 pages, if it got to 60, or between 40 and 60, whatever the case might be. And then they put it down right at the end. So you can imagine it would have taken them a while to read. So an experienced marker will usually, without doing anything, if they just reading your script, it will take minutes close to an hour. And then once they've read, what is the overall impression which they're getting? And the overall impression could say, definitely competent candidate. Wow. The impression, like I'm getting goosebumps reading this response because it's exactly the way Fedi would have written it. Do you get what I'm saying? Or it's exactly the way Rendani would have written it, meaning it's a highly competent response. This is an impression, guys. Or to say, wow, I'm underwhelmed, meaning really, when I think about a responsible business leader, an entry into the profession of responsible business leaders, I'm very underwhelmed. It's a limited competent. Or I've been going through the ups and downs I've been going through the ups and downs. At some points, you showing me your brilliance. At some points, you're actually underwhelming me. You're actually, it's sort of like you're impressing me and then you take it off by doing something that I don't like. So it's an impression that you're building. And we call that overall impression that you're building over time. It's the sit back to say, is this a competent, highly competent, or limited competent, or borderline competent? A borderline simply meaning maybe I need another set of eyes to look at this because I'm getting mixed feelings about it. Okay. So in doing that, a marker can get to competent, highly competent, borderline competent, or limited competent. I'll come back to that overall. And then now they go into each task. Okay. But for you to go into each task, let's look at a task and look at it from an indicator level. And when we look at it at an indicator level, we say, did you demonstrate the relevant indicators? Did you demonstrate the relevant indicators that are required by the task? So the task might be a technical task, might be a pervasive task, but both those tasks will have specific requirements to get to an indicator, to get it to a competent level. Suppose there are certain technical areas that are being assessed. If there are technical areas that are being assessed, the question is, did you actually correctly reach the right technical conclusion about the area that is being assessed? So did you get to the correct technical area and technical conclusion? So it might be a text task asking you something around the text. Maybe let's say they asked you to review a text computation. And in your review of the text computation, you did notice that the preparer of the text computation has actually not adjusted the profit before tax and reversed out the dividend income, which is a local dividend income. You're indicating that your review note is saying that you omitted to reverse the dividend income, which is a local dividend which is exempt from a taxable income and must be reversed out, is demonstrating the appropriate technical level and appropriate technical conclusion. Okay? So that is actually a technical competency area that is being assessed, tax, for instance. Over and above that, there are a number of pervasive skills that are being assessed at an indicator level. What might be those? The one might be managing your time effectively. So what we call a personal attribute in terms of your competency framework. Meaning, did you allocate adequate time to the specific task that you were able to complete it? Meaning you did a line-by-line review. You were able to even sit back at the end and identify things that were not adjusted in this text computation. If you did that, it means you completed the task. Completing the task is a demonstration of competence because you managed to allocate time effectively. Also, you were able to obtain information. For instance, again, it might be in that technical task, again, you were able to identify that they did not reverse out the dividend income. But there is a specific reason I'm talking about dividend income. And when I'm talking about dividend income, I'm not going to just list a whole number of things that are not reversed out. It's because in this particular case study, the company earns dividend income. So I was able to obtain information in my pre-release that I remember that, oh, this is a parent company and it earns dividend income from a number of subsidiaries or associates or normal investments. Because if it's not relevant and you go and say, they forgot, as a review note, you forgot to reverse out dividend income, I start wondering, why do you say that? It becomes that theory dump, which Randani was talking to. So you are not able to obtain information. Also, if I'm reviewing it for the purpose of, it's not for the board, but it's for a tax clerk that prepared this, I could say, because it's exempt in terms of section 101K, that shows me that I've done appropriate level of research and know what dividend income exemption is. And that's your referencing that you guys were asking about. Okay, so those are your personal attributes: time management, research, including professional skills. So when we're talking to professional skills, we're saying, did you do adequate research? It might be around a technical task, like the one I was talking to. It might be around a strategy, risk management, and governance. It might be a merger and acquisition. And I'm asking you, what should the company focus on after this merger? And you bring it to home to say there are only two parties that are key to the organization that has been acquired, the target company. So if we lose those two people, for instance, then we're going to be in trouble because they're going to leave this company with all the IP that we acquired. So then it actually demonstrates to me that you actually did research around mergers and acquisition, and you understand that retaining a key skill in an organization post a merger is very important, but you are actually applying it to the scenario. You're not just saying, oh, retaining key employees after the acquisition will be important, and you'll say full stop. I'll call that theory dumping. But if you tell me that Rendani and Fedi are key to this organization because they are the ones that are running the session, okay, they must be well looked after. First, maybe their remuneration must be adequate and be benchmarked. Secondly, we must ensure that if they were to leave the organization, there is a restraint of trade in their contract that prohibits them to go and starting something of the same nature. It's quite important. Now, it demonstrates to me that you are actually using your research knowledge of your technical ability from a strategy, risk management, and governance perspective. You are then applying the facts of the scenario, and you are actually making comments around that. And that is what I call synthesizing information. You are actually mirroring the information on the day or pre-release together with your technical research. Prioritizing issues and identifying issues, especially in a task where we say provide review notes. You've got to pick up the issues, guys. If you don't pick up the issues, then you're not going to talk about them. But if you do pick up the issues, you've got to tell us what's wrong with the issue, with those, and why. And over and above that, I need to understand that even if you run out of time, you've actually listed the key issues, and that is what we call coverage. Because if we've got a task that I say review, and you go through it, and when you go through it, you see 3 issues, and even the markers only see 3 issues. It will be quite important that you need to list all those 3 issues. Over and above that, to go in depth, telling us why those are the issues and why why, and why. So you need to answer the why so many times that ultimately there is no so what, because then you've identified the issues and you've actually dealt with the issue. That is your death. Okay? And you prioritized because you dealt with them within the allocated time. Sufficient evidence of critical thinking. And this goes also with prioritization. When there is a technical task that asks you, what will be the accounting treatment? What will be the accounting treatment? And here I'm going to ask you to put it into the chat box. I'm asking you, what is the accounting treatment of a particular transaction? What are the priority that you need to deal with to have fully dealt with accounting treatment? What are those? I've asked, the answers are starting to come. Recognition, measurement, presentation, disclosure. Absolutely correct. Okay, so I need initial recognition, subsequent recognition, initial measurement, subsequent measurement, presentation, disclosure, classification. Thank you so much. Okay, so that is you having dealt with the accounting treatment. You've prioritized those things. It demonstrates to me that you've prioritized. If you go and just deal with measurement for 40 minutes and you leave it there, you will not have adequate coverage, and because you didn't prioritize other things. We spoke about demonstrating critical thinking, and I'm going to use an example later when we do a review, where critical thinking is always demonstrated across the entire case study. And when we talk critical thinking, you are able to challenge things that you see and actually even evaluate the consequences of getting it wrong. That is critical thinking. And you just don't do this theoretically. You actually pick up an issue. You know, one of the task that and comment that I always make is where I ask people to review something. Then they pick up, let's say I say review a working paper, an auditing working paper. Then they pick up that the audit working paper does not have sufficient audit procedures. They've identified that it does not have sufficient audit procedures. But they put that as the top line. And then for the rest of the document, they say the following audit procedures should have been performed. And then they spend 40 minutes telling me what should have been done. Surely that is not a competent response. Why? Because you prioritize telling me what should have been done. But I actually do not know what's wrong with what I've done. I just know that you say it's not sufficient, but you did not tell me exactly what you mean. So you need to mirror what you know is a perfect solution, because it's sort of like, it looks like someone has identified the issue and then now they're trying to tell me what is a perfect solution for the rest of the 40 minutes. That's not correct. You've got to now tell me, okay, I'm saying your audit procedures are not sufficient because look at this procedure, number one, that you've done. You've done it until this part, but you left out this part. Look at this procedure number 3. You've done this, but you didn't do this. Look at procedure number 4. It's not relevant because this working paper is not trying to address this relevant assertion. You've got to talk to the working paper that I've prepared. You are reviewing me. I'm not asking you to give me a perfect solution. Okay, and that is where critical thinking is, because you've got to critique what you are seeing. And then you solve problems and make decisions. Make decisions coming to the right conclusions. And you actually add value. Me adding value in that review working paper is this procedure was not appropriate because you did it only until this point, meaning it's a half procedure. You forgot this part of the procedure. I advise you to go and add this. But you see, you're making it specific about what you've critiqued. So I'm able, as the preparer, I'm able to understand, oh my word, oh, I see what was wrong with mine, and I see how to take it forward. So those are the indicators that on what we call the rubric or the marking grid, we list those indicators. Some technical, personal attributes, professional skills, what we refer to as pervasive skills. In addition, communication indicators are very key. Are you clear in what you're saying? Sentence construction, grammar, that's where it adds. Presentation. Does it look clumsy? Does it look well presented? Meaning if I say email response, it's got the necessary format of an email with an intro and a regards or conclusion. Appropriate style. What is your writing style? I can't ask you for review notes. When I ask you to review a working paper and you say to me, have we obtained an engagement letter? Question mark. That is a horrible style. Who are you asking? If you say, have you obtained an engagement letter? What if I say yes? Or if you say, where is a bank confirmation? In my drawer. Those will be my responses, guys. It's because the style of your review notes is not appropriate. If you raise review notes with question marks, you are accusing me of not having done something. It's not appropriate style. What I would like you to do when I'm asking you to review something and raise the review notes, you've got to indicate to me what is wrong with my work. You need to say it is inappropriate. Or you need to say the working paper has omitted to document that there is a bank confirmation has been obtained. Do not say, where is your bank confirmation? And indicate why we need a bank confirmation to validate that an external third party confirms that the cash is indeed in the bank. That is appropriate style. Logical argument. We read an email on Monday to Sean that was not making sense. It must logically make sense to an accountant and to a lawyer or a politician. Just purely make sense. Layout and structure, like I said, it goes with presentation. Appropriate length, Rendani dealt with this sufficiently. You can push it, Rendani. Right. So those are the indicators that we indeed, guys, tick and say this candidate is demonstrating this specific technical competence, this personal attribute, this communication, this pervasive skill, time management. We tick them. Remember, I've already made an impression of you. And generally, what happens is that once I tick, it's like circling that rubric. Then I assess at a task level to say, oh, indeed, I've actually ticked the areas or the indicators that I've ticked confirms my impression that I got at the beginning. That is where I say the normal distribution curve will always say, once I've built an impression of you at a task level to say, Grace had this task. When I read it, I'm not getting a warmy, fuzzy feeling that she knows what she's talking about, or she's technically competent, or she's wowed me to reflect as someone who's an entry as a business leader in the profession and responsible. And then I go and start looking at the rubric and start ticking. I might indeed see that, oh my word, I didn't tick a number of things. That's why I got the feeling that I got at the beginning. And that's where the normal distribution will tell you that that first impression is exactly what will be reflected as evidence. Because me ticking now is just evidencing to my senior markers that actually that's why I'm getting to a conclusion that is, this is a limited competent. But if then I start going and I see I tick a lot more than the impression that I was getting, then I'm sitting at the bottom ends of the distribution curve. Then there's something wrong with either my impression or my ticking. And then I need to redo one or both of those two things and actually understand why am I not getting a good feeling about your script? But actually, when I'm looking at the things that you've done, you're actually ticking them, as in showing that actually you are demonstrating those levels of competence. Maybe I didn't eat my lunch. That's why I'm in a foul mood. And that's why my impression, it's hard to impress me at that time. Meaning then I will realize, okay, I need a break. Let me go back. Because actually this candidate is demonstrating competence on a number of tasks. But guys, again, it's not a quantitative measure. It's not like when I tick 6 out of 10, it means it's competent. No, it's demonstration of competence at a task level. And then now we've done it at an indicator level, at a task level to say, is this a competent task, a borderline task, or a limited competent? And then you go to the overall. When you get to the overall level, this is where, remember, I said to you guys, make sure that you do not have limited competent outcomes in the tasks. Remember, no attempt of a task. If you don't attempt a task, the exam will be written on the 17th of November, 2021 again. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you do not actually attempt a task, you will be rewriting it the following year. If you do not allocate your time sufficiently and you do a task in 10 minutes, we will see it. And that task will potentially be a limited competent task. But if you allocate your time sufficiently across all the tasks and you do well, and yes, where you don't do well, you are sitting on a borderline, as in, yeah, you've demonstrated excellence, and equally so, maybe there are certain things, significant areas of improvement, but you've demonstrated excellence in a number of things, then we might put you on the BC on that task, and that's not the task that's going to pull you down. And that's the task, and then the competent tasks will pull you up. So avoid a limited competent outcome at all times. And Rendan is going to talk to the limited competent where when he's talking about analyzing a task and making sure that when you are responding to all components of the task to ensure that it's not a limited competent task. And then again, then because you did not have limited competence at a task level, you have maybe, yes, but some borderlines, and you've got a number of competent tasks, then it does then stack up to say, overall, you are a competent candidate. And being a competent candidate, does it add up to that initial impression that I got to when I read your full 60-page document initially? And they will stack up. Okay. Rendani, is there anything I'm missing, or just push? Yeah, I think I've yeah. Just to deal with the overall conclusion. The one thing I didn't talk to was the straw man. And I think initially I spoke about the fact that the markers would have read the case study, pre-release IOD, the task list, the specimen solution. But then we developed this thing called a straw man to say, who is actually a competent candidate at each task level? Because remember our specimen solution, and I made it a very clear example, is exactly how Fedi or Rendani would have written it. Is that a competent candidate? Probably not, because that is a competent candidate with 10 years post-qualification experience. So that's definitely a highly competent candidate. So then who is this competent candidate? Is someone below that level? So then we build that straw man to say, okay, it's not someone who's ticking all the indicators, but actually demonstrating a very good level of competence. And that candidate is the one that we say is we're going to assess them against at a task level to make sure that we get that overall conclusion. I just want to see questions, Rendani. Do you want to actually read out questions that I must respond to? Just manage the questions for me.
Yeah, so I think there's one on coaching notes, but I think you'll probably get to it as well when you wrap up. Just in terms of how to go about raising those coaching notes or review notes.
And yeah, there is a task coming. Okay, next.
So, and I think the second one was all about that as well, critically reviewing someone's work. And then there's one from NOMSA to say, I think it's just a matter of the impression that that you are probably talking about. To what extent does it depend on a specific marker kind of situation? Is it possible, maybe to rephrase the question, is it possible that Rendani can have a very good impression of that, of a response, and Fedi maybe having a bad day, not have a good impression of the same response? So maybe just to touch on that.
On that point, I would say yes and no. So let me start with a no, because remember I said we build a straw man. The straw man is an impression of a common candidate. So every candidate's impression is going to be assessed against that common candidate. And because we are assessing everyone against this common candidate, we should sort of have the same expectation level. But equally so, that's why I say everyone is going to expect the same level of impression from every candidate. But equally so, marking is done by human beings that go through their own emotions. So it's inherent in the process as well that the human character might kick in, like you say, Fedi might be having a bad day, and now all of a sudden is actually expecting a lot more from candidates than what the normal expectation level is. And then he's going to not have a good impression. But the thing is, I trust that his technical capacity, when he's now start assessing against the indicators, then he's able to see that, oh, this candidate is circling a lot. But why am I not impressed when the candidate is circling a lot of indicators? Then now to use his judgment to go and mirror and actually reflect and say, oh, my judgment was wrong. I was too harsh. Maybe I need a break. Maybe I need to go home today and rest it out. In addition to that, as you know, the cycle process has got two people. Then Rendani will remark exactly the same thing without seeing what Fedi got to, blind marking it. And then if there are differences between the two levels of impressions and competent outcomes, and then they need to reconcile it. So at least then there are mitigating factors that get us into the right conclusion. Next one, Brandani.
Yeah, and maybe before we go, I think that the last part is a very important element in the assessment. The double blind, is it blind double mic? Just to say that one, it could be that yes, I didn't have a good impression because maybe I struggle to make sense of your structure, your logical flow, and therefore the impression then undermine the quality of some of the technical competence or the response that is coming from them. But then you could then have taken maybe a different approach, maybe because of your experience, maybe in dealing with say your own trainees and so on, and you then are able to read and say, oh, this is actually a good. The problem here is that someone is just not communicating as effectively as I would have loved them to do so. But I could see that they really have demonstrated both technical competence and professional competence, and therefore when we sit together, I could say that no, this is clearly a BC or an LC, but then with the double blind marking process, there's a benefit that FEDI will then say, no, hold on, before we move, did you notice that the candidate actually developed this point from here and so on? And clearly they had applied themselves to this extent, and that is why I ended up at a C. And the point I'm just highlighting is that for every difference in outcome, even at task level, Fedi and I, as the markers for your script, we have to agree that this is a C, this is an LC, or whatever it is. So it's not a matter of, let's see, there's a difference here, which one are we taking? But we have to agree. So if I say it's a BC, I have to actually convince the other marker to come down to my BC, or I would then be convinced I have to go to a C. Because at the end of the day, there's still that professional judgment that needs to be applied. So it is a very rigorous process, and you can get the comfort that if you are worried about something, your writing skills, that at the end of the day, they will have been considered by two qualified CAs, and they will have then come to a response that they both agreed to. And if they cannot agree, this is senior marketing team that can get involved to just say, when I look at this, I will agree or go with marker one, marker two, and so on and so on. So there's that rigor in the process that you can have confidence that your script is not, someone is just not over what had full oversight on it, and so on and so on. So I just thought maybe I'll clarify that point.
Yeah, maybe just to also, Rendani, I've now gone through all the questions. I'm going to answer some, and I know you're going to answer some when you deal with your sections.
Sure.
The two questions that are coming up the most, oh, well, let's call it three. The first one is how to allocate time, and I would like you to deal with it when you deal with tasks. I'm not gonna spend time on that. The second one that comes a lot is how to word or raise those review notes. I'm gonna deal with it later, okay? The third one is what is an acceptable length for a response. Do you wanna touch on that one?
Yeah, I'll touch on that one when we get to dealing with the task. So I think that will be one of the focus areas, yes.
Fantastic, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Back to you then.
All right. I think this is still you.
Oh, it's still me.
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. I thought it's on your side now. So I think we dealt with this on Monday, but I think we need to reflect on it because on Monday we're talking about before the assessment, before the day of the assessment, so the 5-day period. So you've prepared adequately in the 5 days, and now you're walking into the assessment. And, you know, like I'm going to say it again, guys, walking into that assessment, you need to have the Duduzane walk. Your confidence level needs to be the utmost, because your preparation level has been at the top of the pinnacle. So, and I always say to my candidates, when I used to write assessments, I've always had so much confidence as I walk into that exam venue. When I walk into that wall, it's as if I'm going to collect my 100%, because my preparation level has always been 100%. Do you get what I'm saying? Chest out, it must be the walk to show that, you know what, bring it on. You cannot be nervous walking into an assessment. And for you to have that level of confidence is because your preparation level has been excellent. If a client calls me to a meeting and I'm adequately prepared, I cannot wait to get to the client. Because I know, like, I'm confident that any question they ask me, I'll be able to bounce back to it. And I'm eager and ready to actually demonstrate my level of confidence. You walk in, you sit down, you start. The IOD is given to you. You read. Nothing should matter at that point in time. You read very carefully. Sorry, excuse my dog, guys. Just give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Then as you read and comprehend the information. Okay, what do I mean? I mean, don't just fluff around it. Don't just read as if like you're reading a magazine where some points you might catch, some you might not catch. You've got to catch every part of the story. It's like, I'm not sure if you've ever watched a movie where you've got your remote in your hand, because you are rewinding every 2 minutes to actually hear exactly what they're saying. And that's exactly what I mean. And you need to continuously be testing it against the information that you read pre-release and saying, oh, I see how this links. But I'm not saying you are writing. I'm just saying it actually makes sense. It's like you are understanding every part of the story. Why am I asking you to do this? I'm asking you to do this so that ultimately, if after the IOD gets taken away from you, and then they say, actually, what is this story all about, or this company all about? You can narrate it. Not that obviously you'll say it word for word. I'm not saying cram the IOD. I'm saying comprehend it, understand the drama that is happening in there, so that you start questioning it, synthesizing it, and be very flexible about where it's taking you to. Because remember, you had your anticipation about what's going to happen on the day. But if it's not taking you there, you need to be like, oh, I see. Interesting. You know the way Rendani reads, he always likes saying interesting. It's because he just found a fact that he was not aware of, was not expecting, or whatever the case might be. You need to know those things as you go. Link the issues as you read the fact that, oh, now the CEO is going to actually acquire company C. You need to be like, oh, but I thought the cash that we had, we're going to actually open a branch. So where is the cash gonna come from for this new acquisition? Like, start linking the issues, how one affects the other. Make notes as you go. Obviously, don't make too many notes. be very timely. Like I said on Monday, you cannot read for more than an hour. The IOD needs to be read in less than an hour. And you look at your tasks. Then on the day, what do you do with the file? Nothing until you need it. You do nothing with that file. The file is sitting there next to you, is your cushion in case you need it. When I say in case you need it, in case you need to refer to something. But remember, all the knowledge is in your head. But you do know where is what, in case they ask you to evaluate a technical accounting treatment of something, and you know for me to do that, I need those 6 criteria of testing whether something qualifies as an intangible asset. I mean, then obviously only then will I page over to that part of IS 38, and then I know the 6 requirements. I'm not gonna go and copy them and paste them in my solution verbatim. I'm just gonna actually say criteria 1, what was it? Technical feasibility, for instance. I'm not gonna write the whole sentence that is in the standard, but then I'm going to discuss. Because if you write the whole standard, you will or copy it as it is from the standard, then you might think actually you are writing a response, but you're actually not writing a response. You are doing a theory dump, which Randani was talking to. I want you to just say technical feasibility. And then because you understand what a technical feasibility is, and you're going to tell us whether it's a yes or no from a criteria and why. Okay, so you'll use the file when you need it. Randani is going to talk to the tasks. Push it through, Randani. Okay, is that you now?
Yes. Thank you, Freddie.
Cool.
Yes. So, yeah, this is, I think this is where most of the questions start getting answered. So it's very important that we then approach APC, again, not in a rigid manner in terms of, I think some of the questions that are coming up to say how much is enough. I mean, if I say to you, we need to go and audit PPE. If now you then say that, all right, how much time do we normally need for PPE? Then I might be thinking that that means you don't understand what we do here, because you should be asking more probably specific questions to say, all right, how big is the company? What do they do? So now you will then be assessing probably the time that is required, because that's how the APC is. They can never be where now they're sitting and they're saying that we need 2 pages for this answer, we need 3, we need 1, and so on and so on. But it will then depend on the issues that are coming out. And that's how it will then determine that, okay, for client A, you actually need so many audit hours. For client B, you don't need as many audit hours. And I think for you, who has been in audit and maybe gone through first and second year and even other environments, you should understand how such decisions are made. Even though you might not be involved, you might then understand that some clients require more time than the others. They can never be that this is company A or this is audit of this, and therefore it takes 2 hours. So that is something that I'll just want you to be mindful of, that it is so important that you don't go in with these rules of, I need to answer a page, I need to make sure that if I'm responding to an accounting task, I need to do 1, 2, 3. But as Fedi said, you really need to allow the information to lead you. And that's where professional judgment is all about. It cannot be that professional competence is as rigid as what do you call it, technical competence, where we know that we are looking for 5 points for you to get through. But it has to be what? It has to be a matter of consider what is before you. And now, the most important thing for me it's the task. The task, what they are asking of from you should then give you a guidance of how much you need to write. So if I say, give me the 5 key factors, I've told you I want 5 things. So I will not expect you to be writing pages and pages and just then giving me 10 or 12 items. I've told you specifically that I want 5. There might be merits for you to give me more than 5, but those merits should be clearly indicated. And then, as we saw in the APC 2019, there was a case that said, give us or deal with what 7 key risks that are facing what OKIOs. So now you then need to say the task is clear that I'm dealing with 7 risks. If I give less than 7 risks, I cannot say that at least they are the very strong 5 risks, but you have not responded to what I wanted. If you give me 8, yes, you've given me more, but did you not understood what I said or asked of you? I wanted you to deal with 7 risks. So that is what you need to really appreciate about what? About this assessment of professional competence, that allow yourself to be led by the facts, because what your friend is also doing at company A or at company A is not necessarily what you're doing at company B, because otherwise there will not be any need for competitive advantage if there's always a way of doing the same thing in the same exact order and so on and so on. So allow yourself to be flexible and be able to address whatever the examiners want from you. So the most important thing, it's the task. And it sounds like we're starting at the end, but essentially this is the primary thing that you need to get right. Because as Freddy highlighted, if you're asked for A and you give B, no matter how quality B is, because it's not asked, then you're going to LC. If you are asked for 3 things and you give 2 things, then there is no way that you will be what? You will be a C or have a C on that particular task. You will then have a borderline response. And that is why tasks are so important. Because if you miss this, it means what? It means that you either do too much or do too little, or just do something that is what? That is not required or related to the task. So the first thing that we recommend you do is that you read the task carefully. Read it carefully. So why is this important? Or what is reading the task carefully? What is it? Now, how do I need to be thinking about it? Freddy also highlights that you should not be reading this as what? As a magazine or a newspaper article where you can afford to miss something and pick it up later and so on. Here, almost every word considered to be like an inspired word. Examiners, they don't like to write too much. I've always seen them that way, that these guys don't like to write too much. So everything that they put on that piece of paper, they have thought carefully about. So if today they're saying critically review, and tomorrow they're saying critically evaluate, recommend, discuss, it means that they have paid careful attention to that particular wording. And therefore, that's how you need to do it, to say, it said, review the email regarding 1, 2, 3. Rewind. What do they want? They want me to review. All right. So when I review, how do I need to think about it? Now I'm saying that today I see they say critically review. Now, do they want more than what they wanted in the previous case study, in the previous task, and so on and so on? So you really need to pay careful attention to the wording that is being used. And the task page for psycho purpose, it's always been what? A single page. And it means that you need to decide how you're going to how you're going to spend time on it. So for me, I've always been the one that cycles the important thing that is coming out to me. So if I'm now saying that you've got what? You've got critically review. So I will highlight critically and review. And I'm asking myself, all right, I understood that Fede was talking to me about critical thinking. I read the APC competency framework. It talked about critical thinking being the ability to validate, question, and so on and so on. So it might be that in my process of reviewing, I need to question the basis of information that is given in this particular task. Then review, I've now come to understand that I need to approach it in this particular manner. I will need to provide review notes. I need to remember that this is going to be used by someone in order to understand their mistakes, but even more understand how to do it correctly going forward. So that is how I need to do what? I need to think about it. So you need to then pay careful attention to the verbs that are being used, because you are trusting that the examiners, with their limited time, will have then what? Will have then thought carefully about how they are going to be using those words. Then number two is just in doing so, you need to understand or what you are trying to get out from the process of reading carefully the task is to understand all the components of a task. So examiners always complain about that. Even when we are marking, we can clearly see that the straw man, remember the straw man is that candidate. So imagine they're there, they're glowing, and you're saying you want to be like that candidate right there. So how do you become that straw man candidate who is defined as a C by the marking team? So that candidate, they said that this candidate will read the task and they will identify that we said critically review and advise the management on issues coming out from email number one. So when we are doing that, we are saying that that means the first point is to say this has been done. Then the second part is that we need to advise. So essentially, the straw man will say that the candidate will demonstrate probably a good coverage on the issues that were not done right during their critical review, and they will then respond by advising. And advising does not mean that now I've ticked it, that now I've provided advice, but it could be that they've provided practical recommendations that are linked to what, that are linked or suitable to the organization. For instance, as Frederick was giving an example, that sometimes it could be that to diversify or to really deal with the problem of a declining revenue, I need to diversify by buying another company. That sounds like a feasible, what? That sounds like a feasible thing. But now the straw man will be to say that if they advise taking consideration that there's limited cash, that such a strategy might not be suitable, that is how we think about it. So now when we talk about then understanding the subtasks, is to then read and say that, hold on, one, does the task list or the specific task deal with different verbs or different issues that I need to address? That is the first part of it. And I also need to pick up that what? I also need to pick up that a competent response will not only be guided by the content in the task list, but it will also be guided by the conversation in the documents. And again, this is how it works. You don't respond to your superiors or seniors at the office and you ignore everything and the context that they've given you in the emails and then just say that, no, I saw that you wanted me to just deal with what we need to think about when we buy another company. Let me go open my textbook and I'll give you the points. But you have not considered the email. So what I then recommend is that you take those documents and put them alongside each other, the pre-release and the information on the day. See the issues flowing out from one page to the other to the task list, so that by the time they say respond to the issues coming from email number 3, then you realize that, but email number 3, I can't talk about it without considering document number A that was given in the pre-release. So that is what we are talking about when we're saying understand all the components of the task. And a line-by-line critical reading and identification of the task will be most helpful. And this is where you are talking about what critical thinking and bringing information together, synthesis. So it's all about that, bring the information together, because you cannot just look at a task without considering the documents. You cannot look at the task without considering the pre-released information and only considering the IOD. You can't look at just the pre-released without considering the IOD. Everything has to be connected. Then, and if you pick up that there are several tasks coming out, the email could have said respond to, or the task list could have said respond to the email. So now you need to say, but what did they want on the email? So that is how you do what you identify the components of the task. Then the next thing is what I was talking about. The competent attempt answers all the tasks and all the parts of the task. And this will be that kind of setting where now you are saying that, am I done? If you are done, you have considered what was specifically required from the task list, and additionally, all the issues that were coming out, remembering that the examiner had limited pages, and therefore he might have only given you the relevant information. And therefore, you need to think about, why was he giving me this point here? Maybe I need to respond to it, or how does it link back to what, to the task at hand, and so on. So that is what you need to do in planning for the task. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask you about this component stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's say for on the pre-release, you have maybe the CFO is concerned about accounting and classification. I mean, accounting, classification, and recognition of a lease, for example. Then on the information on the day, they just talk about recognition. They're no longer talking about the classification of that particular lease. Do you still go back and also deal with classification?
But I
Or
think
would it be that you assume that that means the CFO now is now fine with the classification? I can just deal with the recognition of this particular lease. I'm just, yeah. How would you go about it, considering the time and all that, putting the correct information down there, not
and
dumping
I think
anything else? Yeah. Okay.
and I hear where you're coming from. So the point that will be important from what you're asking is, what is the primary issue? And the idea then, I think maybe if we're looking at a specific issue, maybe then it will make more sense, because now I'll consider other supporting information. So it could be that, yes, you are saying that they've asked you for, or they triggered, say, classification in pre-release. So now, as we said the last time, is that pre-release cannot trigger something that you are not probably that will probably not be, let's say, to throw you off. So now, if now they come and now talk about the recognition, I will need to find out that, how is it that last week, just on a Saturday, you were asking me about classification, and a week later you are not talking about. I will need to understand what happened during that interim, and therefore, in assessing, did I will have reached a different conclusion, and therefore this recognition and measurement you're talking to me about does not talk to the conclusion that I will have reached based on the pre-release and now the additional information you're giving me. And if then the two are not talking to each other, maybe I'll then need to say, no, before I jump into dealing with the recognition, I remember last time we spoke about classification, and I noticed that you have made the conclusion of X, but based on the facts, the conclusion should be Y, which therefore means that probably the recognition and the measurement that you're now talking to me about, I then don't agree. So the context would be very important in terms of where you're going with the task. But as you're putting it, if there was some uncertainty about an issue, I cannot just now ignore that uncertainty, but I'll want to be able to deal with it. Because remember that it is supposed to be a connected case. It's still the same company, and the period is a week. So significant changes, if they occurred in that week, I need to be updated about it. Otherwise, now I'm wondering, why did you give me that set of information? Does that make sense?
Oh yes, Randani. So, but okay, if the CFO says doesn't say anything of being happy or being comfortable with classification, I will need to touch on it. Is that what you're saying? But if now the CFO explicitly says don't deal with the classification, that's when I will know. But if they don't say anything, probably I will need to follow what you are saying and say why. I mean, what has changed now? How did you come to the conclusion for classification?
And that's a professional skill. Like if you and I are working together and I ask you, send you an email on a Saturday, then on Thursday, I've now decided, will you not want to engage me on that issue first? So that's where your professional skill will come in, that you cannot just ignore that issue if it's related to now what you're dealing with. So it's where now they'll be assessing those skills.
Thank you, Randani. Thank you.
All right, yes. So, and I think that that's just that point about linking the information, that you cannot ignore the facts. I mean, even if you think about if you think about APC 2019, with that issue about the accounting implication and the tax implication of the business rescue proposal, they told you that there was a proposal in the pre-release. Then when they got to the information on the day, they were specific that proposal number 1 didn't go through as expected. So you needed to throw away proposal number 1. Yes, you prepared for it, but in reality, I'm now updating you that we are no longer doing proposal number 1. So if you had come all prepared for proposal number 1, since it's no longer been done, professional skills would demand that it's no longer relevant. You cannot want to make me sit down and explain how proposal number 1 was, but I'm saying we are no longer doing it. They've already signed on this. So that is out. But then they said proposal number 2 was as I presented to you in the pre-release information. So now you are now saying that, all right, now with that, I had already looked into it. Now let me tell you how we need to deal with it, especially dealing with your requirements of accounting and tax implication. So that's a good situation of what you're talking about there, to say that there could be things addressed in the pre-release, but now they're developed differently in the IOD, but the guidance will be there. And the examiner in that case said there were issues about not linking back to the pre-release and ignoring the IOD and just dealing with the proposal that were there before, even though it was said that they're no longer available. All right. And then related to that is to say, when you have now understood the components, you can plan for your time. So yes, it is a good starting point to say 45 minutes per task. But if you tell me that you stick to 45 minutes per task while you are practicing APC 2019, or when you set for APC 2019, I will say that means you didn't plan properly. Just if you tell me you spent 45 minutes across all the tasks, I will say you did not plan carefully for that exam. Because there was a task that said, deal with the 7 risks. And then there was another one that said, give us the factors that we should consider as part of that business rescue proposal. To me, that should not take you 45 minutes, because the points could be quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 7 or so, and move on. And those are some of the points that probably the case already led to. So I will not have seen 45 minutes being spent on those tasks. But yes, if you had said that for discipline, you want to just allocate 45 minutes, that's fair. But after going through the document and the task list, you should have then said, all right, there's no way that I need 45 minutes. Here now I see the ethics question has got more issues on the day. Maybe I need to put 50 minutes here. So the 5 minutes I'm taking from that task, which I'm believing no longer needs that. Then I'm looking at the 7 risks. Oh, okay, this is what they wanted now. This should take me a good 30 minutes, so I've got 15 minutes to spare. Maybe I need to go through that other task that I thought was quite challenging, and so on and so on. But for me, the process of reprioritization is an ongoing one. It should not be that after 45 minutes, I move on, after 45 minutes, I move on, but you really need to apply yourself and consider carefully what is being required. And maybe before I jump to the questions, let me just show you with regards to what? Task G, document 7. So not sure whether you have it with you, but I think even if you have the slides, you can then do what? You can then just walk, we can just work together on this. So there was obviously introduction, email headers, and so on, but the core was this. So hi, the key risks facing OKIOS were summarized in the PowerPoint presentation Yvonne emailed you in October 2019. I think it was section 8. So now the examiner is doing what? He's linking the pre-released information to the task. And at this point, I'm thinking that I don't think you need to go back. You can just say, oh, all right, yes, I remember those. There was this one slide. So if you then had been spending time with the pre-release, then I'm thinking that what? That should be quick to remember. Otherwise, just put the page in front of you and say, yes, I'm with you, examiner, but that was that part. Then they went and say, are they genuinely the main risk OKIOS is facing? Do you want me to respond to it? I mean, I don't expect the CFO or my seniors to send me an email with a question and I respond without addressing the question. So this was a subtask. So you needed to respond to that. So here the examiner is basically asking, what was your initial view regarding the risks that were provided in the pre-released information? So now, what does this highlight? It highlights that when you go through the pre-released information, you need to form views. You cannot just be reading it. You need to form a view. So a view could be, I don't believe this. But then, what is your basis of not believing? Or I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think this is a valid risk, and so on and so on. So did you then consider and compare the risks that were listed there with the other risks that the listed companies in the South African space were facing? And when you compare, did you hold a view that these are key risks that a company like OKIOS was facing? So if you had not, the examiner is saying, now start thinking about it. Then they said, are you up? And then I thought they were also asking, are you open to changing that view? Remember that you need to be flexible. So maybe you had not thought about it, that, yeah, I realized I read those risks. To me, they made sense, but I don't think I had given them enough thought. So now that you as the CFO are asking me whether those are valid risks, I need to apply myself. I cannot say, yes, they were all valid risks. I mean, already now I'm worried that did I appoint the right person in the organization? I will not want a CA that will not be able to challenge the status quo. I want them to be able to demonstrate that what professional skill or professional skepticism challenge the things that we are doing. So now you have not thought about it, you have been forgiven, but now start thinking about it. Is this in line with your research? How does that impact the content in your research file? So these are the questions that are coming to mind. That when I looked at Fairvest, when I look at Vukile, did they identify similar risk? If they had not, or if they had, did I agree or did I not agree with them? Because at the end of the day, from what we've seen from the Steinhoff side, it means that everything we read in financials, we cannot just believe, right? It means we really need to still exercise critical thinking. And this is what the examiner is challenging you. Did you believe me when I said these are the key risk-facing OKRs? Okay? Then they say, if we had to formulate the top 7 risk-facing OKRs, which do you think these are? Okay, so you are asking me a second question. So that is a subtask. So now the question is, are you simply expected to simply list those risks, or is more required from you? Do you need to just copy and paste the risk in the pre-released information? And do you have information about risk management in your file to begin with? So these are the questions going through your mind. If we had to formulate the top 7 risks, what are they? What do you think these are? Feel free to replace any of the 5 risks. So you are asking me to feel free to replace. Are you now challenging me to say, do I agree that there is a possibility that some of those risks are not key? Do you understand how the examiner is interacting with you? So at this part, I'll expect you to get excited now that, yes, it's getting there. I'm getting a sense of what the examiner wants. Okay? No? All right, let's quickly then. You can assume that these 7 risks, you can assume that these 7 key risks will be for our internal use at board and executive level, and that we'll never need to publish them to external parties. Please add a brief explanation of the top 7 risks. So now they are clarifying their position. So at the end, they want the top 7 risks. And they are what? They are requiring a brief explanation and the potential impact on OKRs. Then you should then think that there is no way that it could be that I can come into an APC assessment, copy and paste risk from a financial statement, and then get a C outcome. So that should be an impossibility on right here. So if you were tempted to copy Vukile Fairvest's top 7 risks, then you knew, or you should know, that there was no C for you, because it cannot be the APC, right? It can't be. So we cannot even debate that it could be that. Now that means the examiner set a paper which was a fact-finding exercise, that the person who finds it, then they get a C. It can't be APC. So you had to then be clear to yourself and honest to say that there is no way that I'm going to be a CA and then my biggest skill or my most desirable skill is my ability to find things and come and paste them in an exam. So if you then are thinking that you'll just copy the risk coming from an annual report, that means you need to really change that view. Then they say, regardless of whether these are some of the previously identified risk or additional risk you identified. So when we read this, we are also picking up something that I had highlighted before, to say the slide that the email was talking about had 5 risks. So if they're talking about 7, as a minimum, we needed 2 new risks as a minimum. So let's assume that you agreed with all the 5 risks and say, yes, I agree with all the 5 risks. Then you needed to do what? You then needed to provide 2 more risks in order to get to the 7 that you wanted. But now you're sitting here and you're saying that, 1, how much time do I need to dedicate? How do I get the C? Let me imagine that glowing strawman candidate. How are they expected to come out with a C here? So now they're saying that, do you agree these are the key risks? So if you say to me, yes, I agree, and you don't provide me with a reason, already you've not answered the task. Do you understand? Because you've not applied any professional skills to that response. How can I ask you a question that requires professional judgment and you give me a response that is not substantiated? So when we then went to the task list, it said respond to Gideon Madima's email regarding the key risks facing OKIOS. So what are you responding to? Everything that we identified above. What is everything? One, the assessment of the appropriateness of each of the 5 risks given as key risks. So I would have then expected you to then say, risk number 1, I do agree it's a what? It is a key risk because of 1, 2, 3. Risk number 2, I also agree it is a key risk because of 1, 2, 3. Risk number 3, I do not agree that this is a key risk because of 1, 2, 3. Risk number 4, I also do not agree that this is so. That means in that slide that you had 5, but I'm not agreeing with 2. So that means I've got 3 to start with. So that is you having answered what? The first part of the task. Then number 2, it means that you now need to come up with what? You now need to come up with 4 more if you were in my position of disagreeing with 2, because out of the 5, you are now left with 3 and you need to get to 7. So come up with 4. So that is what? Requirement or task number 2. Then number 3, I will not give you a C outcome if you have not explained all of the 7, even the one previously identified. I will not give you a C if you have not what? Explained those risks to make me understand what is the issue there. And the potential impact, it is then what? It is then what is the impact on revenue and what is the impact on cost. If you are not making me see that, then why should I consider something to be key that will not disrupt my revenue generation process or model, and that should not be inflating my cost? That cannot be key to me. So therefore, you needed to convince me what was the potential impact. So this 1, 2, 3, it's a C response. Anything else, it's not. That is how you needed to approach this. So now the question you might then be having is that, did I need to focus on coverage and so on here? But then you can clearly see that the structure is the one that should guide you more than anything. That for me, with this, you can now tell me that I'm going to spend 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and so on and so on. And maybe you have not considered the time that you've already spent in analyzing the task. Some people are fast typers, some are fast writers. So if you had given me the 3, I'll probably have answered this question in 20 minutes. But because I needed to do that exercise first, maybe I needed 10 minutes first to do that exercise of critically reading and evaluating the information given. So therefore, for me, it could then be 10 minutes was that exercise where I was doing line by line reading. So yes, it's a 2-paragraph email, but I've now invested my 10 minutes so well that by the time I decide to start, I'm clear and I've got a big and I've got a very clear picture of how my response is going to look like. So automatically, I've addressed issues about what? I've addressed issues of professional skills. I can now also address issues of communication because I have to respond specifically to the required. And I can also address the issue about time management. And I can also address the issue about structure, because I would say if I'm to give the 7 risks, I might need a table where column 1 is identification of the risk, column 2, explanation of the risk, column 3, potential impact. But then what is the problem? some candidates came and said, respond to Gideon's email regarding the key risk-facing OQs. And they read the email and found that 7 risks. Then they said, this means that I need to identify the risk-facing OQs and mitigating strategy. And I'm so happy that I did research on Vukile. I'm going to copy that annual report. And they missed the point altogether. But do you see the process of breaking down the task and determining how far you need to go? Are we all clear? So just to then, where are we? Okay, Fedi, I responded to that. You must avoid. Where are we? Yes, the time.
Yeah, I think you've responded to all, Randani,
All right.
or I have in the chat box. Maybe
All
we
right.
can give them 5 minutes break before we go
Yes.
to the next. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, so let's go for that 5 minutes break. Then we could then be thinking about this given what we just discussed. Yes. So now I'm on what? I'm on slide 14. So slide 14 also addresses one of the most critical questions as well, just around what? Just around coverage and depth. So remember that one of the issues that we picked up was that examiners were saying that candidates in some cases were writing either too much and in others too little for them to achieve a successful outcome. And in some cases, we did pick up that they were saying that if you didn't identify this issue, then it was going to be difficult for you to achieve a positive what? A positive outcome. So then so what I just want you to get, the first thing is one, there is no formula for the right coverage or depth. So you cannot go in and say that if I'm dealing with a technical task, I need to do what? I need to make sure I've got a lot of points about the issue. If I'm dealing with a task on ethics, it cannot be that I need to do what? I need to go and make sure I've got so many points. And you will have seen when you go through, or if you had done so, if you had gone through APC 2018 and APC 2019, both of them had an ethic task. In 2018, the examiner said there were 5 core ethics issues, and he seemed to suggest that 3 of the points were very good points, or very good coverage. I was like, oh, 3. It sounds unexpected that 3 will be what will represent very good coverage. Then it was a bit unbelievable. But you then go to what to that response that was considered to be HC, and you're like, the HC candidate had 4 points, and they were HC. How? I thought coverage meant that you needed to have as many possible points as possible. Then when you read even more, the examiner indicated that he liked the candidates what as depth of the issues, analysis and reasoning of the issues. Then you're like, oh, okay, I've now figured the formula out for what? For the APC ethics task. Then you go to APC 2019. And in 2019, they said that going through, or when we look at the LC candidate, they had 5 or 3 issues, but then they were considered to be LC. But now I'm confused that how can 3 in 1 year be considered enough even to get to a point of an HC? Then I get to 2019 and 5 points are not even enough to get me to a BC. What is it that I'm missing? So the thing that you might be missing is that there is no formula to coverage and depth. And now, when you read what the examiners wanted, they said that in that APC 2019 ethics question, first of all, you needed to cover or have a good coverage on the funding consideration and a good coverage on the ethics part. If you have a good coverage on ethics, which probably was good 5 points, but you don't deal with funding, then it meant that your response was a bit sketchy. So that is how you need to always be mindful that do not go in with these rules where now you're saying 5 points, I need to move on. But it could be 5 good points, but they've not touched on the issue. And therefore, that is not going to be a C response. So that's why for me, it's all about critically analyzing the IOD, but the pre-release, you had even more time to analyze it. But the IOD is what you then need to be able to critically analyze in that period, that first initial time on the day of the assessment. So when we talk about coverage, just to make sure we are talking about the same thing, it's just the ability to cover as many issues as possible. So in other words, your response has got breadth. It touches on issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, and so on. And touching means you are discussing even so. It's not just a matter of there is a conflict of interest, there is independent issues. No, you need to go into the detail. And depth focuses on what? On the quality discussion of a primary issue. So that is what you just need to think about, or make sure we are all on the same page around coverage and depth. And the key issue is to identify what is that core issue and make sure that you've given it enough attention. Then additionally, it means that in most cases, you need to have touched on all the tasks for you to be able to hit that coverage point or to be able to identify the core issue. And the classic saying of what is it, quantity or is it what quality? I think the distinction that I was talking about between APC 2018 and 2019 addresses that. And if you then bring it a bit or a little bit closer to home, looking at the APC 2019, let's just look at task A, the one that had about 60% BC responses. So the first thing is that it was an auditing task, technical. And the core issue was to undertake risk assessment from an assertion level. Then I went to the examiner's report and I said, okay, examiner, what were you looking for? So then the examiner said to achieve a competent response, candidates needed to address all the assertions related to what? To investment property and adequately address each. So they had this more of adequately address each, meaning that it seemed they were suggesting that you can have all 5 or 7 assertions, but they will forgive if you mess up 1 or 2. And messing up meaning that you maybe you were moving too quick, you didn't hit things right there where they wanted, kind of setup. So in this case, they were saying coverage was important because it would have been surprising if you then said you had investment property and then there were assertions related to an account balance and you then decided to just deal with 2 of them. I will look at you but say, why did you not address all of them? And because that would have been confusing, then it would have been difficult to award you a C. So they said you needed to identify or address all of them, but it was forgivable to not be competent or have a strong basis for your analysis on all of them. That's one. Then number 2, they then said, however, the issue or the core issue was the valuation assertion. And this needed to be dealt with in detail. So they were saying that I could forgive you if you mess up completeness, if you mess up existence, if you mess up presentation and classification. But it's unforgivable to not deal with the valuation assertion appropriately. And I mean, you had just done research on rebosses that had an issue with their auditors regarding what? The valuation of property. So you should have realized that valuation is a big issue. They told you about a maintenance that was done, and you should have then said, that is another issue that gives rise to the risk of what? Of valuation. Then there was a big fair value adjustment in just over a year. Again, that gives rise to what? To the issue of valuation. And their loan book or their gearing is measured on a loan to what? On a loan to value ratios. So that means a higher value puts them at a very what? Favorable position. And the fact that the valuation of properties is complex, if you had gone to that Rebossis article, you will have then picked up that they disagreed with management. Management said, we want to appoint someone else because we don't agree with your valuator. Then you can imagine that this is a very complex exercise. So, I mean, you have so many things to support the valuation assertion. And there were indicators during your research that this was an issue. And that's where the examiners were saying that, therefore, it was a bit unforgivable that you will not see valuation as a high what? You will not assess the valuation assertion as what? As of being of a high risk. So that is something that examiners were what? Were saying that, yes, coverage is important, but at the same time, depth on a particular issue is important. So it's not that if an issue is coverage, you don't need to deal with depth and so on. There is no formula to it. Then when you get to task C, on the other hand, it was an accounting task, again, a technical task. And then it was not a matter of what? It was not a matter of depth, but it was a matter of what? Of breadth or coverage. There were a number of balances. And for you to really achieve a competent response, you needed to deal with all the elements that were given. So that is how you need to what? You need to think about it. So again, it is not what? A matter of having a prepared kind of what? Solution or toolbox to say, if it's an accounting task, I need to do this. If it's an auditing task, I need to make sure I've got coverage. So that is around planning and understanding the issues and the required tasks. Then, if now we are to just summarize all these issues to say that, okay, now maybe this is starting to make sense. I really need to move away from expecting or to be more flexible with my responses when it comes to the APC. So now I need to then think that if I'm to put a response together, what will the examiners consider to be a quality response? And these are the points that we've compiled just going through the previous examiners' reports, looking at the HC responses and what they liked. And additionally, just putting in our marking experience into what? Into the mix. And we then felt that, all right, it seems that examiners, they like this. SAICA is looking for this. And we have now come to also find that even in practice, when I get a response from another CA or another professional, I actually like a response, or I actually like a document that will exhibit this what characteristics. So first, we are saying that the response that we consider to be of quality, it should draw insights from the scenario and capture the issues facing the company. So we call that skill contextualizing. So if your response is not contextualized, then know that that impression that Freddy's Kai was talking about, every time it starts going down. I don't know whether you've read an article and you're saying that, nah, this doesn't talk to me, because there's no way that this person understands the training environment. There's no way that this person understands the issues I'm going through, and so on. So the contextualizing is important because it gives an impression. So if I'm reading and I see you going through that valuation assertion, and you are just telling me or giving me copy and paste from the standard that valuation uses what uses complex inputs and so on. I'm thinking that, but wait, did this candidate consider issues around the maintenance that we've incurred? They consider that there was a big fair value adjustment. That's not coming out when I'm going through the response. So this seems like a prepared response. It's like they had already decided that they were going to give this to me before the IOD. And you need to ask yourself that did my response get impacted or my file get impacted by the IOD? And if you are just copying things from the file, that means something's wrong. You are not contextual, you are not taking the things that are occurring into consideration. Then number two, the response that we like is the one that draws carefully the relevant research and does not simply dump content from the file. So we consider that to be what? Good research skills. So a good research skill does not mean that you name drop. So that's not what we want. You don't what? You don't just bring issues that another company is facing into the scenario or into your response. So it has to be applied research. The response has an appropriate coverage of issues. And maybe just to clarify the application, it might be that you're comparing. So let's say in that 5 risk kind of situation, you could have then said, the risks that I've seen in Vukile are like this. And I did agree with them because of 1, 2, 3. Now you have showed me applied research. But you have not said Vukile did 1, 2, 3, and we are doing this too, and it's aligned. No, it's enough to just say Vukile, Fairvest, I've reviewed the financials and they had similar risk. So we are happy with that, or we are not happy with that because of 1, 2. Express your views as well. Because it's not a matter of what this other person is doing this, so therefore we should do it. Then the next point is about coverage of issues, which we just dealt with. Then the other one, it's about dealing with the core issue, and that's the depth part. And this point also came out when Fedi was talking about what? Integration skills or integrated thinking. That we need to be able to integrate ideas coming from the pre-release, coming from other companies, and coming from the IOD, and so on and so on. So you need to show that you have considered the case fully and you understand this issue impacts the other issue, and that is why you're going this way with your response. A good response also does what? It questions the validity and rationality of the information presented. So you don't just you don't just agree. And I think the earlier question about what if I now go in and the CFO is no longer talking about classification and they are now dealing with recognition and measurement, then I need to then be able to do what? I need so I need to then be able to question the validity of that conclusion. And when I question it, remember what Fred was saying, that I need to deal with what is on the table and be able to be able to express my view on it before I start saying, no, this is the correct one. But what we normally see and what examiners are complaining about, someone will say, no, CFO, I disagree with your logic. This is actually supposed to be an operating list, or this is actually supposed to be a finance list, but they've not dealt with how the CFO might have gotten to that response. So that is something that then undermines the quality of your response. And do not provide conclusions that are not substantiated. And then being a responsible leader, it means that you also consider or bring ethical leadership or demonstrate ethical leadership and social responsibility. The fact that companies do not only have an obligation, a moral obligation to the shareholders, but also to the communities, to the employees, and so on.
Yeah, Rendan, but we have so many cases where auditors disagree with the, I think maybe some of us would have had that experience throughout our training, that auditors it's possible to disagree with the management, especially around this lease. I've seen a couple of disagreements around the lease thing. So in those cases, does SAICA then consider those type of issues? Because there's no specific answer for that particular thing. You might have more than one answer where the auditor is going the other way and the management is going the other way. Because it seems like there's only one answer when they give the specimen solutions.
But remember,
Do you make that consideration?
yes, and I think that's a very good point. Um, so that's a very good point, Temba. And remember, the specimen solutions are exactly that they are responses from a candidate. And it does not mean, so it's just them saying that maybe we've considered all the responses that are HC, we like this one better. But it does not mean that was the only view considered. It does not. Yes.
Okay.
So as long as you come and say that I have considered that this is not a lease, and my view is based on 1, 2, 3. So I'm sure through your program you will have then been exposed to that marking grid that Fede was talking about, and you will have seen that it has got what different verbs. In some cases, it say, did the candidate consider 1, 2, 3? Did the candidate highlight, discussed, and so on? So in some cases, we are not even looking for the right conclusion. We are looking for the basis of your discussion, recognizing that the world is complex. Some of the issues around revenue leases have not been resolved. I mean, that's why they keep putting out this additional guidance to clarify that people are getting confused. This is not so clear. So that's just the practical aspect of it. So if you are to give your views, you should not be you should not be too much worried about its accuracy or not at the end of the day, or whether someone will agree with it. But it's all about, is it substantiated by the correct technical principles? If it is based on the correct technical principles, then it's likely that it could be something that maybe when they are sitting as the exam committee there, they will say, yes, this is a view that we accept, and this is a view that we might need to adopt and therefore be considered in the marking process. So that is how that works. So it's very important that
so
we don't underestimate that element of practicality.
Yeah, so wouldn't it then be better, and that they give us situations where they had maybe two type of scenarios or type specimen answers from candidates, where the other candidates went to the left side and the other one went to the right, but they would have still considered both of them competent.
Okay, go on, sure, finish.
Yeah, no, that was it. I was just wondering around that.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, one needs to appreciate that they don't want to be also too rigid in terms of just saying that this is the answer. But when you go to the examiner's report, you'll then see them saying a good outcome or a good response was the one that addressed, or was the one that concluded, was the one that did 1, 2, 3. So they want you to just take principles coming from that process. Because they are saying that if you had considered whether there was a lease, that is a good response. If you had considered the fact that the lease needed to be classified as operating and or a finance lease, then that's a good response. So that's the kind of things that they're saying that we should then do what? We should then be mindful of in presenting our responses. And that is why here, when I say a quality response, I didn't say that it has to be the correct answer, because that is never what professionalism is all about. It's all about what? It's all about responses that have got strong, well-substantiated arguments.
Okay, thanks, Randani. Thanks.
But thank you, Temba. Then the other thing is what? Just that response that demonstrates a strong, accurate, and valid technical understanding without necessarily dumping the theory. And to this point, if you are now discussing, please stay away from giving theory and then applying it. That will just waste your time. Get to the answer or to the response that you want to get to and show the reason or the logical flow that you want you considered in getting there. So let's say you needed to advise whether a particular contract is a lease. You then say that given that this is a lease based on these factors, then you start dealing with them. Do not then say a lease is a contract that does 1, 2, 3. We need to consider whether there's an underlying asset. We need to consider whether we are doing. No, 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 don't do that. Just get to the answer. And remember that your audience will need to watch to be able to follow that answer. So that is very important, that you do not spend time going through what? Going through the theory. Can you get a C if your conclusion is not right? But then I think the response that I was talking to Temba about, that what is the response? I mean, why are you saying there is a right answer? What makes a right answer? As Temba was highlighting, that I could say this is a finance lease and I give you my reasons. And you could then come and argue that it's an operating lease and you give me a reason. The fact that I might agree with you, but does not necessarily mean that my answer was wrong. It just maybe means that you might have convinced me more. So the right or wrong kind of response, especially with elements that require significant judgment, then that's that is something that one will need to be careful in dealing with it. But if it is a situation where I say, give me the number of things or units that I need to break even, and I've got fixed cost and variable cost and revenue, then I'll expect everyone to come up to a similar answer because there's no judgment there. The answer should be the same regardless, unless there are some debates about whether this is a fixed cost and so on and so on. Now that could be a situation of what of consideration. And additionally, one needs to just be careful that this is not a test of technical competence, but it's a matter of how to use the technical responses, answers, and develop business solution. So the idea here is that you can get your break-even answer wrong, but you can now say that I've got a problem. I need to do what? I need to increase my sales effort. So yes, the break-even should have been 200. You said it was 300, but you are saying that we still need to actually pursue similar strategies to increase sales and so on. And that is just the core. Because again, I think practicality or your experience should have highlighted to you that, I mean, companies do get their financials wrong. Your auditors come and question their financials, and this back and forth and so on. And that's the kind of thinking that should not be undermined in an assessment like the APC. It's just a matter of reinforcing it. Matipelo, you had a hand up.
Yes, Randani, thank you. I just wanted to find out. So my biggest struggle is what you were speaking to just a few minutes ago regarding specifying what the theory is and then applying it afterwards. So I think now, how does one then bridge that gap? For example, how does one then make a reference to, for example, an IFRS without stating the whole definition of what revenue is defined as, for example? So how does one actually go about responding, making reference, and making sure they provide the correct or the correct level of depth and context that is required for that response.
All right. In response, is a car a PPE asset? Hmm?
Yes.
How do you know? Hmm? How do you know?
In my head, I know because I'm applying the definition. But then now the audience, I'm worried about the audience and not saving the audience that I'm responding to. That is my biggest fear of coming short.
But now explain to me, why is a car an asset? Explain, like, just ignore me understanding it. Explain to me why you say it's a PPE asset. What is your view?
Okay, layman's terms, it's a possession that is owned by the entity. It's
Okay.
a tangible, it's a tangible possession that is owned by the entity. Yes.
Okay.
And then now, how do I go about measurability now? Do I just say, okay, then I will measure it at cost, or I will measure it at fair value because I don't mention the standard. I just come up with things.
Yes, I would say do that.
Okay.
But make sure I understand and I follow. That even if I understand the standard, if I'm to open it, you will not be talking contrary to it.
Okay.
Yes.
But then now let's talk the board, right? I'm presenting a case to the board whether or not for them to, or let's talk about that accounting policy case study that we had to decide fair value or cost. So now the board, remember then the different level of expertise of the people that are sitting in the board. Not everyone has got the accounting acumen or background or strong technical background. So now how do you then deal with it? Do you now then become too technical when you're dealing with such? Or do you not even go technical at all because of the diversity of the people that are sitting at the board?
But yeah, at the end of the day, I think one will then need to move closer to even the practicality, to say probably the board, when they receive it, they'll probably direct it to the audit committee because they understand the issues much more closely. And maybe then the audit committee in the deliberation, they will say, the board, we've considered this, what we've come up with, and we're good to go. But I would not expect, practically speaking, for the board to consider all the issues equally, and that's why the concept of subcommittees come in.
Oh, okay.
That there will be more. There will be some members that are very clued up with marketing. There will be some members that are very clued up with HR issues, clued up with business issues, and therefore the subcommittees. That's why they are formed, even to deal with specific issues. But at the end of the day, the board might then just need to sign off on the overall proposal, but supported by the confidence of, say, a chair of a particular subcommittee. So I think that's something that one needs to be mindful of.
Okay, I follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What about questions that need to be technically correct? But as you put it, it means that you are now on point 8, that your response needs to demonstrate a strong, accurate, valid technical understanding. If it's not, then there is no way that it could be a C. So let's be clear that technical competence is not being ignored. It's very important. But I'm just saying that in some cases, IFRS requires a high level or high degree of professional judgment, and that cannot be ignored. Okay, let me quickly wrap it up.
Sorry, Rendani.
Hi.
Yes, can I just ask a question to follow up on what Matapelo was raising? So the response to the board, right, on accounting issues, will I be wrong then to write a bit of, say, for instance, a bit of explanation, like what an asset is before I go into my discussion? Will I be wrong to do that, or I don't even have to write it?
Yes, because another way to present is that will you be comfortable with a board that doesn't know what an asset is? Like, I mean, this is your board. They're supposed to be responsible for all the data related to a company. So I should not be explaining to them how a PE evaluation works. Like I'll be worried that why am I paying? Why are you part of my board? Do you understand? So I need to give them a bit of credit, and that's why they will then say the board has to be diverse. Yes, the marketing guy might not understand it, but that's why there's that subcommittee which will then deal with the issue much more closely. And if they require more technical response, they might engage management. That management, give us more info on this. Then we'll update the board on these matters. Do you understand?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, I'm following.
All right. Then number 9 is that you need to respond to the task. Number 10, manage your time carefully. Do not have a long-winded response. So that is something that you need to always be practical. So I think, remember that the board is supposed to be diverse. It's not everyone that is supposed to understand. Like, I mean, you might then be a board member or going to be a board member. You might not be clued up about contracts. And if you're not clued up about contracts, you will trust your other board members to update you so that you can form your own view about matters like that. So that is how practicality works, or in practical instances. All right. Then, so this is what I was saying, that for me, when you are presenting that when you're presenting that what we consider to be a good response or quality response, you need to consider this. You need to be mindful of this. Challenge your own answers. So in this period, remember that I saying that go back and review your program providers assessment and the feedback that they've given you, and assess it that when you got an LC, did you really demonstrate, contextualize it? Did you really demonstrate applied research skill? Were you technically correct in your responses? And you will then be able to better understand that, no, this is why I got an LC in this particular task, but now I understand that this is how I should have thought about it. Now, to then give you a sense of what was expected come APC 2019 task F. So the email was, I'm sure that Gideon will have told you by now that as part of the negotiated settlement with the business rescue practitioner, OKIOS agreed to a 30% reduction in the rental to be received from Ziki for the next 3 years in exchange for a 12% shareholding in Ziki. We apparently also get a seat on their board. Interesting. I know it is too late for OKIOS to change its mind because they've already agreed. But what key factors should we have considered prior to the meeting to vote on the business practitioner's proposal? In hindsight, I am not convinced that we made the right decision to reduce our rentals and take an equity stake. Please be honest. I will not take your views to be criticism of management's decision. The task, respond to Yvonne email regarding the Ziki matter. Then for me, your research will probably have included maybe one of these two, or even other communication or research articles. So, I mean, this one said, is EdCon too big to fail? And what will it do to to jobs? I mean, that's a point that one will have needed to consider. And what will that talk to? It will talk to point number 7, ethical leadership and social responsibility. That when we make decisions, we need to consider the impact on jobs, especially in this tough economy. Then flashing at conflicts relief. So these are some of the articles that you can go to. The links are still live or valid. I think it's from yesterday. I doubt that much will have changed in that period. But for me, then when I responded, or when I considered my response, these were the issues. To say, first, understand the task. What is Yvonne asking of you? Remember, understanding the task is important. That's point number 9. If you don't understand the task, then your response might not hit that C. Then we are saying that if you rephrase the article, she's asking, what are the factors that we should have considered in making the investment in Ziki? Do you understand that when we agree to exchange the rentals to an interest, companies were essentially investing in Edcon? Or in this case, Okios is investing in what? In Ziki. So now what we are asking whether we've made a good decision by buying an investment in this company. What kind of thinking do you go about before you make an investment? I will need to consider, what is the fair value of the investment that I'm getting myself into? Is the company that I'm getting myself into a good company to begin with? Hold on, it's in business rescue. How did it get there? Is it something that relates to management, or is it sector just declining? And the proposal that was put on the table, do I trust the person who put it there? So this is how I will need to think about the investment. So have I thought about what the task required? Then I will consider empirical evidence and the lessons learned. And this is where your research file comes in. When now you say that we've noticed, or we've seen that in Edcon, a lot of the landlords were talking about saving jobs. So then I will tell Yvonne that, Yvonne, this decision, please rest assured that it might have been a good decision, because we are what? We are saving, or this will contribute to job opportunities. So if the financials don't make sense, at least you have demonstrated that ethical leadership. Are you happy with it? Maybe it could be a priority to her, and that could make her sleep better at night. Otherwise, she might think that, you know, the board wants returns. So that is where the investment part comes in. But now you have applied the Edcon case, and maybe how you can then think about it, you can say that even other landlords, in the case of Edcon, they made a decision in order to save jobs. Then now you're showing insight into what? Into that. But now the point still stands in relation to Okios. Then issues considering Ziki in the context of Okios and the circumstances surrounding the transaction. In the pre-release, they told you that Ziki is one of the top tenants, and also they bring quite a lot of footfall into the Okios retail property group. So that is something that I will need to consider, that yes, let's regard whether Ziki is a bad company or not, and all these things. Maybe the fact that the footfall will still come could give you comfort that this was a good decision. But this is where now we are debating the issue, or discussing the issue. And to show the practicality, one doesn't know whether she's right or wrong. And my email might just only give a comfort, but it does not mean that there will be a right answer or an incorrect answer. Then coverage and depth, will need to say, which one should we prioritize? In my view, here you needed to give as many points to Yvonne to give her the comfort. So if I was then sitting for this, I would have then prioritized coverage, making sure that all the points that I give are well discussed, but more coverage than anything else. Then when it comes to integration, this was a strategic question, but are there any tax issues that I can consider? The valuation of the interest, given the restriction that were there and so on, that could be some of the things that I need to talk to you about. And any ethical and social consideration to include, that will also be what? Valid consideration. So that is how I want you to think about this. So it's all a matter of what? Principles more than what? More than anything. Are we together? Any questions before Freddy jumps back in? Let's see. ABC. Okay, I think most of the questions have been, but I'll just address some. But Freddy, happy for you to what? To come in.
Thanks, Rendani. I guess as we wrap it up, team, I think I went through some of the effective communication already, but just to want to stress some of the most important parts on this slide. I guess from an effective communication, you need to know that all what you submit is all that's going to be evaluated as the single evaluation piece as to whether you are a ready to be a responsible business leader. Nothing else. There is no year mark to consider. There is no the fact that you've been through ITC, you're getting good ratings at work. It's all those are irrelevant. So this is the only thing that you get judged on, and you must give it the necessary attention and take it as seriously as a lightning. When we get to the spelling errors, when I mark or assess a candidate's response and it's full of spelling errors, I highlight them all the time because I get more and more annoyed when I see spelling errors. When I see sentences not being started with capital letters, name of people not being started in with capital letters, I get more and more annoyed, and I raise that expectation level. You could say then I become less and less objective. Yes, because I get more and more disimpressed. So as a result, you've got to actually limit the amount of spelling errors that you make. I'm sure if you read the sentence that talks to the spelling errors, you will actually see the irony in it. The same as proper sentence construction. So if you don't construct it well, I don't make sense out of it. It might, it's actually quite interesting when there are two markers sitting, and I'm one of them, and someone got to a borderline competent or a competent outcome, and I'm sitting with a limited competent. And we are reading some of your responses in a task, some of your responses. And when we read, it does not read, or when you read, you don't understand what the person is saying. And the marker usually will say, oh, I think, and emphasis on I think. I think what the candidate was trying to say is this. I always look at them and I say, did the candidate say that? I don't care what the candidate was trying to say. I care about what the candidate said. Do you get what I'm saying, guys? Because it's quite, and it could just be a word that throws the whole sentence off. And another marker who's more patient could say, I think I can see where the candidate was going. I don't. Trust me, I don't want to see where you were going. I want to see where you got to. And that is about proper sentence construction. I don't mark what I think you were trying to say. I mark what you're saying. Because if that script, because I want it to stand on its own in a court of law, guys, I don't want it to be backed by support of people talking to it, or people justifying what you were trying to do, or what you're trying to say, what you're trying to articulate. You need to say exactly what you mean and mean exactly what you say. You know, proofreading your response is one of the key things, but I'll always say, what are you going to spend your time on? I'm a big proponent of make sure you get it right the first time. Meaning, when I write, I spend time in my writing. Meaning, I don't rush my writing. I type as fast as I could, but I make sure that I get it right the first time. Because I'm one of those candidates that don't have the luxury of time to go and reread that work. But I have the confidence that what I wrote is exactly what I meant. And what is in there is what I wanted to say. So it's quite important. But if you know you're always making mistakes, I guess you need to then factor in and budget the time to go read and proofread. So the question is, do you spend time upfront perfecting it so that by the end of the assessment you've perfected it, or do you need to budget time to go read and make sure that you didn't mess up, because you know you always mess up spelling or grammar, whatever the case might be. Hit it on the nail. Get to the point. You know, sometimes we read and you're going in circles, and we just want you to say, get to the point. One of our Marcus Larato will tell you how important it is to just get to the point. She always says that to some candidates. And you've got to have the right tone. It must not be an accusation. It must not be jumping to conclusion. Just say it in a very nice way. You can be very critical, but yet very nice. You don't have to be harsh. It need not be a harsh tone. Just drive the message to home. And we're going to do this shortly when we look at a review. We considered our audience, avoiding the dumping of the theory, and the logical flow. Push it through, Randani. This is where I wanted to deal with an example of reviewing a task. Think about task C, which was the deferred tax balance review. When you do a deferred tax balance review or a review of anything, it means you need to have technically been able to, if you had required to draft it on your own, you would have done it better. That meaning you always have this technical board that is your starting point to say, oh, I know what a good one looks like. Let's see what they've given me now. And you start with a line-by-line review. Okay? Line-by-line review, it does not mean you just go straight into the first line. Yes, as you go straight into the first line, you're like, what am I actually reviewing? I'm reviewing a deferred tax balance or a deferred tax calculation. Think about, firstly, the model. Because a calculation is a model, meaning how should a deferred tax model look like, or deferred tax calculation look like? My technical knowledge tells me that there must be a carrying amount, there must be a tax base, there must be temporary difference with signs to indicate whether it's taxable temporary difference or deductible temporary difference. There must be a tax rate applicable, and then there must be that deferred tax. Is the model does the calculation that I'm reviewing, is it in line with that formula that I've just presented? And that is your first, it's your overarching to say, am I in the right model or calculation or formulae? And then I've got to say something around it. That is the first thing, the model or the calculation or the formula. And I guess if it's it's the correct one being used, then you'll say, yes, well done on using a correct formula, if it's a review, for instance. But if not, then you'll say, I see, like in what would have helped is the fact that you would have inserted a column for the temporary difference. You would have inserted a column for the tax rate, just so that it's easier for review or something like that. Not necessarily of the fact that they got it wrong in task C, but for presentation purposes, you would have, it's just deviating a little bit from what you know. Then you do the first line. You go line by line, evaluating if the carrying amount makes sense, the tax base makes sense, and the temporary difference makes sense. I think in this one, they told you that do not worry about the mathematical accuracy of the calculation, meaning you don't need to pick a calculator and start punching whether carrying amount minus tax base equals taxable a temporary difference. But if they didn't, I would expect you to sense check whether the calculation makes sense. So you're evaluating whether the tax rate that is being applied is the most appropriate tax rate on a line-by-line basis, whether the sign of whether it's a taxable temporary difference or a deductible temporary difference, whether it makes sense, whether technically the tax base of an income received in advance makes sense, whether a tax base of an accounts receivable makes sense, meaning have they taken into account the ECL provision, for instance? Does it make sense to have deferred tax on goodwill? So you do this, guys, you don't jump around. Even you can even use a ruler where you hide everything else. You start on the first line and make sure you critically evaluate it. You're identifying issues and omissions. You do this on a line by line all the way till the end. Then when you get to the end, you need to sit back and say, well, I see what you've included in the deferred tax calculation, assets and liabilities. Did you include all the assets that I know about this company? Maybe in the pre-release, they gave me a balance sheet. Well, I need to go and compare the deferred tax calculation with that balance sheet, those current assets and non-current assets, and check if the list of their current and non-current assets in the deferred tax calculation is complete. Because there could be assets that are sitting there that have not been included in the deferred tax calculation. Then I need to mention those. Why have they been forgotten? Similarly with the liabilities. But the deferred tax, but the balance sheet that has been given might have been the balance sheet pre-consolidation, meaning the parent and the subsidiaries. And there was a task that I saw that spoke about consolidating subsidiaries. Are there any assets that are arising from consolidation that I need to start thinking about them from a deferred tax perspective? If they are, have they been? So I'm doing a completeness check. And once I do a completeness check, I've completed the review. I've demonstrated technical competence and some of the pervasive competence being completing the task, bringing in the fact that I've done a completeness check. but I've not completely responded to the task. Remember, completely responding to a review task, the preparer needs to know how to go and correct those things. So as you do line by line, as you are raising those review notes, your review notes need to come in and demonstrate how you need to actually correct them. Meaning to say, there is an investment in associate that is equity accounted that I see you did not include in your deferred tax calculation, for instance. Please do include it at the carrying amount that is equity accounted, but the tax base will simply be the cost because from a SARS perspective, they do not recognize the equity accounting. Something like that, that demonstrate how the candidate or the preparer will have to correct it. That is what I talk, the middle circle, which is coaching and direction. Have you responded fully to the task? Technically, yes. Pervasively, partly. You're not done. Because you need to then sit back again and say, the fact that I've identified so many review comments and demonstrating what you need to go and correct. What are the consequences of you having gotten all these deferred tax balances so wrong? At least it's a deferred tax balance. But I'm thinking, what could be the consequences of getting a deferred tax balance wrong? Either the financial statement will be materially misstated, the auditors could qualify the financial statement on the basis, and I'm mentioning this, could qualify the financial statement on the basis of the incorrect deferred tax balance. That's why I say it's a good thing it's a deferred tax balance and it's not a current tax calculation. Because if it was a current tax calculation, I would say, well, there will be SARS penalties and interest if they were to audit us. And because it's a non-compliance with a tax law, then I could even say, well, there's a non-compliance with a law and regulation, which will require me to report. Meaning you need to always evaluate the consequences of the wrongdoing of something what you've reviewed. And as a result, what is the effect? As a result of these consequences, what is the effect on you as the preparer? Then I could say, I'm worried about the level of technical competence here, and I would suggest training. Or I would suggest another layer of review on the job training and the likes. You're doing a performance evaluation now for the person that prepared this. And if it's someone that is senior to you, your tone needs to be low, as in you're not shouting and screaming. You've got to say, I understand. You could say, I understand you've been out of varsity for so long. So you are probably not closer to the latest technical developments. But what I would suggest is that we actually have quarterly technical updates, which will ensure that we don't get these things wrong. Or going forward, I should be the one reviewing before you review on a high level, because I know you've got a strategic understanding of the business, and you are going to be able to pick up other things that I might miss. So you're actually, as much as you are, it's like you're shouting at them, but you're actually petting them at the back for something that you know they will be good at. So that is tact. That is tact. Okay. I'm going to stop here and ask any question. Is there any question on how to approach a review task? No question. Right. Now let's look at an ethics type of a task. When we look at an ethics type of a task, guys, remember, like Randani was saying, there could be a standalone ethic task that you see that here they are actually asking us about ethics. There is an ethical dilemma here, and I need to respond. Or an ethical dilemma could be embedded in a technical task, where, for instance, again, you are reviewing a deferred tax calculation and you are seeing that the tax base, for instance, of something that is not deductible is sitting there. And they did indicate that they will claim the deduction because they spend so much money on it, for instance. Well, that's wrong. The mere fact that you spend so much money on it doesn't mean you're going to get a tax deduction. And then you've got to address that to say that is it is inappropriate to deduct to allow a deduction on something that is not allowable. And you've got to address that amidst your technical task and say, because doing that will lead to interest penalties and also non-compliance with laws and regulations. And auditors might report a reportable irregularity, especially because it's being done by someone at our level who is a director. Do you get what I'm saying? So you are addressing it. And I like the first point that says to us, Psycho will never trick us. It's if you feel like, and we spoke about this on Monday, if it feels like a concern, it is a concern. If it doesn't feel right, talk to us, meaning document what does not feel right about a particular decision, a treatment, or whatever the case might be. And remember, gone are the days when like ethical concern will be very clear, where you can see that someone is stealing or someone is perpetrating fraud. We will more likely make it a dilemma, as in going left will compromise some values, going right will compromise some values. So it's really a dilemma. Okay. Some of the examples that I've used amongst COVID will be to say, right, during COVID, if someone says something like, if we're trying to warn them to social distance and they say, well, it's my life anyway, I can do whatever I want. That is a moral dilemma. If someone says, to you, I can sell you a bottle of wine at 800 rand. Take it or leave it. Okay, sounds like a moral dilemma too. Okay, do I accept I need the wine? But is it right for that person to sell it to you at 800 when the cost is 50 rand? I'm just putting it out there. I know they're in business. Thanks, Matatu. You see, those are things that are dilemma. Okay, so when we look at an ethical dilemma in task I, for instance, and I will demonstrate to you why task I was such an important task, but people were actually dealing with the ethics at a high level. If you remember, in the 2019 assessment, there was a decision that the trust needed to make. They wanted to buy properties and sell them at a profit. They are in business because they were trying to close the gap of the losses that they've been making. What was the issue with that? Look at who the customer is. The trustees are buying properties and selling them at a profit to Oikos. I mean, if I'm looking at it from the trustees of the company, of the trust, they're doing a good thing, because from a business perspective, the trust will have a profit. But these are the trustees are the same people who are directors of Oikos. Are they acting in the best interest of Oikos, or are they acting in the best interest of the trustees or of the trust? Isn't there a conflict of interest here? Why are they in both organizations? Or even if there are, because maybe they were appointed, and rightfully so, should they not be declaring their interest before the decision is made and walk out of the meeting? And not, like those, from a technical perspective, you know how to deal with a conflict of interest at a governance level. And what are they going to say when they get to Oikos, and the Oikos is starting to make losses because it's buying properties at a very high price? So it looks like they're just shifting profits of one organization to the other. And they've got privilege to information of the two companies. You've got to drill it down, guys, to conflict of interest. The other one that you can always use is your CPC, your King, and your Companies Act when you're dealing with ethics question. For instance, we had a task that was dealing with ethics, but it was more on the independence of the auditor. Most of my candidates went and said that the auditor is not independent, full stop. That is not enough, guys. You've identified the issue, but you haven't dealt with the issue in depth. Like, what makes them not independent? You've got to tell me it's because they prepared the information before, now they're going to review it. So there is a self-review threat. It's because they've already gotten so much amount of money. Like in this case, we were saying we need to appoint the auditors of Oikos as the auditors of the trust. You need to say, well, they are already coining it at Oikos. So now we're going to be paying them again in the trust. Is there not going to be a self-interest threat here? Because they are actually now highly dependent on the Oikos group for their survival, meaning their audit revenue, or their revenue will, the significant component of it will be coming from Oikos family. What about the intimidation? The fact that you say, if you don't do this, I'm not going to give you this audit. That causes an intimidation threat. You've got to deal deeper into the issues, guys. Don't just leave it at an independence level. And also go and demonstrate, if it's an issue with a director, say, this looks like you're not demonstrating or depicting a fiduciary responsibility, or you're not actually exercising your fiduciary responsibility well. Why am I saying that? I think you're not acting in the good faith of Oikos, because you're stealing their profits to come and close the gap at the trust level. Why am I saying you're not acting in good faith? Is because remember what Section 75 and 76 of the Companies Act tells us as directors to do? acting in the best interest of a company, putting forward the best food for the company. As a result, you are also in contravention of a relevant principle in the King Code. Because there is non-compliance with the Companies Act, there could be a it's a non-compliance with laws and regulations as well. And also the auditors could report a reportable irregularity, especially if it's done by directors. So you need to pull all these things together, guys. If you remember the opening paragraph of the email that Freeman sent to you was saying, if you add value in this instance, you will actually do well in your career here in the Oikos family or Oikos group. It just sounded like they are dangling the carrot in front of me and they want me to actually be a yes man type of a guy just so that I progress well in my career. And I don't think that is what you want to be known for, having climbed up the ladder because you are a yes man or yes ma'am. And do address it. When there is when you are faced with that, do address it in a very nice, polite way and say, thank you. And indeed, I would like to see my career going somewhere in this organization because I'm very ambitious. However, I just want to note it that my way of adding value includes challenging the status quo, challenging things when they are not being done appropriately, just to make sure that I add value into the organization and I improve their processes and I improve their compliance with laws and regulations and. You see how calmly and competently I've demonstrated that I'm uncomfortable with certain things being said without actually accusing my boss of trying to bribe me or something like that, but I've challenged it. Okay. I see Desmond is saying hello. I see Rendani has responded to some questions. Nomsa, question on review. If for example, an audience states that their technical knowledge of deferred tax is not up to standard, is it wrong to give them a brief explanation of deferred tax? Well, if it is brief, there's nothing wrong with that, but leave it to being brief, but also back it up to say, well, we might need to have a training on that area, NOMSA, if they're still going to continue having to review or to prepare deferred tax. You need to address it. Matatu is saying there's no cost, it's not available out there, and I guess there's no competition, that's why the cost is that high than normal. Those trustees were stealing as they should be acting for the best interest of the beneficiaries. Correct. Yes, and Matatu, you just reminded me, those the profit was actually going to be, I think one of them was a shareholder, if I remember correctly. So it was ultimately going to filter down to the shareholder. Okay. Okay. Rendani, is there any other question that I missed that you haven't? I see you've responded to some of them.
I believe I had responded to most, but if I missed any of your question, maybe you can quickly raise your hand and you can just ask it directly, then we can just respond to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Ferdin, my challenge mainly is on when we answer, I mean, when some of the question depends on the other questions. around the scenario. I think that becomes a bit tricky because at some point one wants to pick the questions that they are comfortable with when they start with the exam. But I've seen in some cases, like I think on 2018 ethical question, they ask you, what are the governance issues there? I mean, when the mentor was asking you for issues that you are experiencing at
Yes.
at the company.
Mm.
So if now I go straight and answer first question being my ethical question, that means I would have missed other stuff on the, because some of the stuff from ethical stuff, they will be coming from up there, like your internal audit issues and your I mean there were a couple, I think most of them,
Yeah.
they were coming from
Other
up
part.
as you are doing the
Correct.
question. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky for me. That is Saika now trying to say we need to start from up down?
No. But I think one thing you should be aware of, those issues that you're talking about are not coming from your response. Meaning it doesn't mean the response needs to be written down like in task A, B, C, for you to know that when you get to G, you have to link them up again. The issues are coming from the IOD.
Yes,
so because you would have read the entire IOD, you've got full context of the issues that when you get to this task that is dealing with ethics, for instance, let's say you start with it and you are responding to the ethics task with it, which is task G, for instance. You've got a full understanding of the entire case. You will respond appropriately, and you will also bring that internal audit issue because already, even though you haven't responded to the crux of the internal audit, which is task B or C, you know that it's already an issue. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, I do.
Yeah,
I think you've answered my other question around why we need to read
you
IOD.
need to read the entire IOD and read the entire task list before you answer the first task that you choose to start with. To know exactly where and which task overlap to where. Okay.
No,
Can I ask
you've
a
answered
question?
me. Thank you.
Yeah.
You've answered me.
Go for
Can
it.
Can I ask a question? Oh, who raised their hand before me? Okay, so my question is on the relative weighting of ethics, of an ethics question. Somebody asked a question earlier. Yeah, so would there be being specifically marked down because you did not perform so well in an ethics question? Or does it have an equal weighting? You know, it seems as though there's a lot of professional judgment in this exam. So yeah, I'd want to understand the relative importance of an ethics question.
Yeah, ethics carries a good weight. So how do I put it? An LC in an ethics task will not be looked at or be forgiven that easily, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, in the context, I'm sorry to create conversation, but
Yeah, no,
generally, based on what you said earlier on, we would be avoiding an LC throughout the exam, because an LC is almost like an automatic fail, whether or not you've answered the question. That was my understanding of what you said earlier. However, if you are like, you are borderline, let's say, on an ethics question relative to everything else, would that still be looked at unfavorably, so to say?
No, it won't be unfavorable. And I think one thing that I must actually just mention as to how to do well in an ethics task, and me saying well, it means competent or borderline competent, because a borderline competent will not bring you down. You get what I'm saying? for you to do well in an ethics task is not necessarily about the answer, because like you guys said, it's a professional judgment. It's about you walking me down the journey and telling me that we've got an ethical dilemma here. Going this way, these are the consideration. Going to the right, these are the consideration. These are the pros, these are the cons. And I'm doing a weighting exercise here. Ultimately, I'm weighing this more because of the following reasons over this. Because you've walked me through the process of the pros and cons of both sides, you've done majority of the task. You are already a BC. Even if your conclusion is inappropriate, you will be BC'd because you've walked me down the journey. Do you get what I'm saying?
Understood. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Currently, Atara is next.
Hi, Feli. How are you?
Good yourself.
Good, thank you. My question is actually general, a bit general. So I've seen instances where in some solutions you find that they sort of aggregate a response to a list of things. Say, for example, the key risks that Rendani spoke to earlier. You find that I have one liner saying that I believe the following risks are key, right? And then I list them down. And then you find cases where they talk to each risk individually. So I just wanted to know, like, how do you know when to do that? Because I find that it also saves time if you do it like that. But again, you lose on the competency if they wanted to be listed individually.
It must always be individual, because unless your reasoning behind why they are all appropriate is the same, in which case you can group. But if they are reason, because I'm not interested in whether you agree or disagree whether it's an appropriate risk or not. I'm more interested in your reasoning behind your agreeing or not agreeing.
Okay,
and
no, that makes
more weight is given to that reasoning. So if the reasoning is going to be different for every single risk, you've got to deal with it separately. But if the reasoning is the same, then you can group them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Any other question?
Sorry, Fedi, I just have specific questions that do not, I think it's gonna waste time for the other guys. Is it possible to be helped with those type of questions on this 2019? I struggle with some of the stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Rendani, how do you want to address those?
Yeah, maybe I think we can officially close the session. And if there's anyone else with additional questions, we can stay behind and then just quickly respond to those. And then, yeah.
Okay. Right.
Okay,
Yeah, no, we
thank you.
can officially close. I think, guys, thank you for your energy also just to stay on until so late. We are 40 minutes beyond the scheduled time, but you maintained it. I guess this is it. And I don't need to wish you the best, because you will do what is necessary. I'm not gonna, the reason I say I'm not gonna wish you the best is because I want to only admit into the profession responsible business leaders into the profession. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that let the person that is ready and that will prepare adequately go through. So just again, another final reminder, the assessment starts on the 12th of December, meaning I expect your full attention on the assessment from the 12th of December all the way until the 17th of December. There cannot be any distractions in between. There cannot be any work or anything of that nature that will distract you from the prize. Okay. And yeah, best of luck, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.